All right, so I think we're up on YouTube. Did our other colleagues join us?
I believe we're still waiting for 3.
Okay. See.
And I think we're now down to 2.
Okay, terrific. Well,
and now 1.
Now 1. Okay. Countdown. All right, so I think we're about ready for the blast off. Then we'll start this. I'd like to call this March 23rd meeting of the City Council of Charleston to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilwoman Del Chapo. Councilmember Shealy.
Here.
Councilmember Saccharin.
Here.
Councilmember Mitchell.
Here.
Councilmember Brady.
Present.
Councilmember Gregory.
Here.
Councilmember Waring. Councilmember Seekings.
Here.
Councilmember Shade.
Present.
Councilmember Griffin.
Here.
Councilmember Appel.
Here.
Councilwoman Jackson.
Here.
Mayor Tecklenburg.
Here. And now if y'all would like to join us, Councilmember Gregory, would you please lead us in an invocation?
Yes, let us bow our heads. Dear God, as we celebrate Women History Month, let us honor and applaud the women of the world, for they are the earth where the seeds are planted and we all grow. God, help them to continue to break the glass ceiling. We need your help because their wisdom and their understanding and what they bring to the table is so different from what men do. Give and bless all the women of the state, all the women of the city, and all the women who help to staff and make Charleston great. Lord, we don't thank them enough because without them, we would never exist. So God, help us to honor, appreciate, and love, and be forever grateful of their presence. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Now, if you will join me to my right is our American flag. Join me, please, in our pledge of allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America,
And
to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I have a resolution in remembrance of one of our colleagues who is somewhat unexpectedly passed away just last Friday night. The Honorable former council member Brenda Scott. My colleague, council members Gregory and Mitchell joined me yesterday at her memorial service, but I wanted to share this resolution with council this evening. Whereas the city wishes to recognize one of South Carolina's most distinguished citizens, Brenda Charlotte Scott, who was born in Charleston to Albert and Marion Scott on January 10th, 1949. Whereas Brenda Scott attended A.B. Rhett and Simonton elementary schools, she graduated from Burke High School in 1967, attended South Carolina State University, where she also graduated in 1971. So she was a Bulldog twice with a degree in elementary education. In the fall of 1971, Brenda began her teaching career at Courtney School, which she taught 7th grade, and joined later the faculty at Mitchell Elementary, where she taught until she retired in 2005. While teaching, she developed an interest in politics and was mentored by Joe Murray and Herbert Fielding, who served in the state legislature. Brenda Scott served as a poll manager for a local election and got involved, ultimately decided to run for a seat on Charleston City Council to represent the West Side District, which she won. She was the youngest female in city history to be elected to city council at the age of 26 and was one of the first African-American women to serve in that role. During Brenda Scott's tenure, she was elected mayor pro tem twice. She served on the board of the aquarium while they were building that important facility in the city. Brenda Scott retired from city council in 1998, but continued to serve on community boards and housing committees. She was a tireless and faithful servant of her church and the Lord. She attended Wesley United Methodist Church. She was a lifelong member. She had no children, but she raised and cared for many in her family and this community, and so many students that she nurtured and taught along the way. Brenda Scott really left an indelible mark on our city and earned the respect and admiration, high regard of all who she came into contact with, and the city has sustained a loss in her death. And we, on behalf of the citizens, we extended to the members of her family yesterday this expression of loss, sincere loss, regret for their loss, and a consolation by the memories of her fine life and achievements, particularly to the city of Charleston. Councilmember Gregory was a classmate of hers in the Burke High School class of 1967, who honored her yesterday as well. Councilmember Gregory, would you like to add any remarks about your friend and colleague?
I really appreciate the opportunity, Mayor. I mean, because again, it goes to the contribution of women to this city. For those who may not know Brenda, even the time in our city when Brenda became a council person, you would not recognize this city after Brenda worked hand in hand with Mayor Riley and the other council members to really change this city. I mean, that was during the time when our mayor was the director of economic development. And during that time, guys, those of you who don't know, if you had seen this city back in 71, 73, 74, it's nothing like it. So it's women and people like Brenda, okay, who has helped us to get where we are. And Mayor, if you just indulge me just for one more second, Brenda was also a neighbor. Brenda lived on Court Street. We grew up together. We played together. Brenda is one of the last persons, okay, from the original families of Court Street that was left, okay? This street is totally different like most streets in our city. But I'd also like to take a shout out, Mayor, to another Court Street woman, Miranda Holmes, okay? Who was also a teacher of Councilwoman Scott.
That's right.
She would sit us on her porch and she would teach us the art of politics. That's why you've got two council members from the same block representing the same district, District 6. And I would be remiss, Mayor, if I don't shout out to the most wonderful woman in the world.
Did you finish?
No.
No.
I'd like to shout out to my mother.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Happy birthday, Mrs. Gregory.
Who is 100 years old today,
Hey.
of sound mind, who was also a Court Street mother, who
Wow.
raised 4 children, and other children on 10 cents an hour, and was able to maintain and keep her property on Court Street. I have no understanding of how women, and I'm just not talking about my mother, how women pulls it off in terms of raising 4 children, washing their clothes. When my mom washed clothes on the washboard and she had to hang them on the line, sometimes they froze. So I'm saying all that to say, as we honor women, I honor and I thank my mother for making the kinds of contribution, not just to her family, but many families in this city that she raised and was of a different hue than her own. So I salute my mother and her contributions to her church mother, Emmanuel, and all the kinds of things that she's done for our community. Mom, I love you. Thanks for your indulgence.
Absolutely. I think, Councilmember Gregory, if I may say, that's the first time I've ever heard you get really choked up. So you're a good son. Good job. I hope your mom was able to get signed on and be with us this evening.
We're hoping, Mayor, that at some point we'll do something formal with a proclamation so that she can come in City Hall in person and accept it.
Oh, great. Terrific.
Thank you.
Not to get carried away, but speaking of moms and women on council, that's how I got to personally know Councilmember Scott, because I made a point to introduce myself to all the council members after my mom got elected. So my mom and Brenda served together for 6 or 7 years on council. And back then there were four women, Mrs. Scott, Mrs. Jefferson, my mom, and Mrs. Ader on council at the same time. So they did a remarkable job. So thank you for all that. Next, I'm going to call on Councilmember Shade in order to recognize the recent success of one of our youth swim teams. Councilmember Shade.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of council, Madam Clerk. Over here, if you can see under the heading of JJ Ayers, several young people who've been waiting patiently. These are wonderful athletes. They are members of the Southern Marlins racing team, the SMRT, SMART team. They're the cities of Charleston's year-round swim team led by Coach Michael Stewart. And Michael, I see your name up. You may want to show your video with us as well. And I hope Lori Yarborough, our wonderful Director of Recreation, is with us. Coach Stewart sent 27 athletes to the state championship meet held earlier this year in Greenville. And I want to recognize their achievements and offer some gratitude for the excellent way in which the SMART youth athletes represented our city. As everybody knows, this past year was difficult, but for those who were in sports, particularly youth sports, they were vulnerable to all kinds of disruptions and challenges that come with this global pandemic. In particular, the swim world has not been immune from the trials of COVID-19. The athletes on our city swim team accepted those challenges and excelled in the face of all the adversity thrown in their way. Their practices had to be socially distanced in a swim lane. They had to be engaged in dry land workouts in masks and competing in day-long meets with no parents allowed inside to help the coaches or the swimmers remain organized, or just simply what parents do is offer words of encouragement and cheering on. The opening of the North Charleston Aquatic Facility also drew significant numbers of the swimmers away from our city's SMART team. So COVID had a definite impact on all of that. And also the WL Stevens Pool was shut down to them, and the MLK Pool downtown was not always available for, and thus they were practicing outdoors even through the month of November. But the state meet had the following results. So in the city of Charleston team came home with with a 5th place finish, including 15 state titles. The athletes who came in with state titles are as follows. Wells Cloud. Wells, are you on our screen? If you could raise your hand. There you go. Wells competed as a 14-year-old and won a state title in the 50 free, the 100 free, the 200 free, the 100 back, and the 200 back. Daniel Elbridge. Daniel, you with us? Raise your hand for us. There's Daniel. 12-year-old. He won a state title in the 50 fly, the 100 fly, 50 breast, 200 breast, and 100 1M. Sean Graber. I see Sean. He's one of my constituents. There's Sean. He's a 12-year-old who won a state title in the 100 breast. And Phoebe Hayes. Is Phoebe with us? There she is. 10-year-old. She won a state title in the 100 fly. In addition, the 11 and 12-year-old boys relay team won gold medals in the 200 medley relay, the 200 free. And in Coach Stewart's words, the highlight of the meet was saved for the final day when the 11 and 12-year-old boys won and crushed a state record in the 400 medley relay by more than 5 seconds. The team was consisted of Daniel, Sean, Jake, and Parker. Those guys are there. Raise your hands to be recognized. So I just want the city council and our community to be aware of the wonderful work that these young people dedicated themselves under adverse conditions. We are proud of them. We encourage them. We applaud them for their hard work, considering all the adversity they went through. I see Lori, if you want to add a few words, or Coach Stewart, please do so.
Councilmember Shea, thank you for the opportunity to bring this group before you. These young folks are faces you all don't get to see every day, but Coach Michael and his coaching staff work with them regularly. The parents are wonderful to support their actions and their efforts. And so the city's very lucky to have a group like this, especially during tough budget times. These faces are the kids that are out there swimming in the pools and doing those things. And we're just so thankful that city council is able to, and the mayor are able to continue to support them and our coaching staff. Coach Michael does a great job. And I want to make sure we recognize him because he's the one that leads them all.
Mr. Stewart, are you with us? I'd love to hear from you.
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes,
sir.
Okay, no, I'm proud of these kids, as well as the kids that are behind us in the water right now training for a meet this weekend. Just want to thank all the city council and of course Lori and Stella and JJ for all your support for our program.
Well, terrific. Thank you, Coach. And Marlins, way to go, way to swim. And thank you to your coaches and your families that helped make all this possible. Congratulations.
I'll keep it up.
All right. Thank you for being with us this evening. Now, not on the agenda, but I just want to slip in a quick announcement from Chief Courier with our fire department and a milestone that the team with the fire department has achieved. Chief?
Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to pass on that effective yesterday, the fire department completed its bid for reaccreditation with the Center for Public Safety Excellence. That comes up once every 5 years, and it's the measuring standard for fire departments in the country. One thing to note is that we retained our accredited agency status, which was started under Chief Brack, but we also are an ISO Class 1 fire department. So there are only 102 fire departments in the country that have achieved that. I thought that was important for you to know. And I think it goes without saying, but I didn't do this. This was the fire department team, and you are fortunate enough to have just a fantastic fire department working for you. So I just wanted to pass that on.
Great. Thank you, Chief. Congratulations for that. And we recognize it's a team effort, but we thank you for your leadership of that team. Appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Councilmember Shade.
I talked to Chief Courier after I saw his email yesterday, and he's so modest about his role in all of this, but he is a leader of that department, and they have their own adversity they have to go through with our stations being, some of them are under construction or remodeling, but it's just it's such a big deal that only 102 fire departments. And think about this for a second. 102 fire departments in the entire United States have achieved both of these certifications. And that really is a testament to our men and women who are so dedicated to their work and the leadership that we have in order to have that kind of accomplishment. I don't want to guess how many fire departments are out there, but only 102 throughout our country have this dual recognition. Really is a big deal and something for our fire department to be proud of. So thank you, Chief, and thanks for all of your leadership and all the men and women who work to protect our city and serve our community. We salute you.
Thank you. And just for the record, there's 29,705 fire departments in the country.
Thank you, Chief. And council members, I guess I just can't proceed without also recognizing today the sorrow over the tragedy and senseless killings out in Boulder, Colorado. I didn't know anybody out there until our former planning director, Jacob Lindsay, moved there recently. We reached out to Jacob last night. He and his family are fine. But again, such a senseless and tragic waste and insanity, really. So keep Boulder and those affected in our prayers. We've already placed our flag at half staff in their honor. Next on the agenda is our public hearings. We have
Mr. Mayor,
quite a few of those. Yes, sir. Councilmember.
Before moving on,
Yes, sir.
and I agree with you on Boulder, Colorado, is tragic. But I would hope that some of us would reach out to those in our Asian community on the incident that happened in Atlanta, the tragedy that happened in Atlanta with the killings there. Many of us know people in this Charleston community who happen to be Asian. Think about it. Just give them a call. We've done that, and you'd be surprised of the release, frankly, and the good feeling of being thought of when something like that happens in any community, much less if it's perpetrated upon a people. So you're spot on with Boulder, Colorado, but also don't forget about those in our Asian community to reach out to them during this time of, frankly, hardship. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Well, a point well taken. And I hate to admit that it seems like in the last week, it's become almost like a everyday occurrence, some tragedy like this happening in our country. And it just furthers our resolve. I know Chief Reynolds is on the line, and I've spoke with him last night about this as well. Our commitment to keep our community safe. It's our number one priority. But when you just have craziness like this occur, it's you have to be prepared to respond. But at the same time, we're doing everything that we can to be watchful and prevent everything that we possibly can. So thank you, Chief, for those ongoing efforts. All right, next we have public hearings up, quite a few of those, and I will turn over to Christopher Morgan to introduce those one at a time, and then we'll see if anybody has a comment. Christopher?
Mayor, members of council, and I believe Mr. O'Brien has this first one, which is closing and abandoning a portion of Floyd Drive. I see he's coming on here.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, members of the committee. This is a portion of Floyd Drive, which is West Ashley. And Chip McQueenie, if you're on, Chip, do you have anything you wanted to say on this one? I know this is in conjunction with a little bit of a property swap and realignment of that road, but Chip's got the main information on this.
Chip, you out there? You want to share anything? I think this matter has come to council already adequately. The purpose here right now is to see if there was any public comment that needed to be made, which it was duly advertised. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone from the public that wants to be recognized?
No one has signed up for this item.
All right.
I move for approval. Second.
Second.
Motion to approve. Any further discussion from council? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Council member Del Chapo, you have me at a disadvantage because I'm not at home with my new puppy, but you've got a beautiful pup there. Number two, Mr. Morgan.
Okay, I've got the screen going. Can you all see the city seal? My cursor on that?
Yes.
Great. Okay. All right. So this is item E2. This is 569 to 571 King Street. It's the corner of Cannon Street and King Street. It's 1/12 of an acre. It is a rezoning for the property from general business to mixed-use workforce housing. That's our MU2WH. It's owned by the Jenkins family, group of family members. It was before Planning Commission last month, and they recommended approval 7-0. I'll show you some images of the property. And of course, it is in our urban core area in our current comprehensive plan. So that is an appropriate zoning in that urban core area. Here is an aerial view of the property at the corner of Cannon and King. Here is an oblique view, and you can see the structures. These structures are going to get renovated as part of this rezoning. It's not a condition of the rezoning, but the family is working to renovate the structures, and that's part of the reason they're pursuing the rezoning. Here are the street view of the structures, and there's a corner store there at Cannon and King and other retail space, and then residential space on the second floor. And here's a view from King Street looking north, King Street looking south with the structure on the right, and across the street. And the applicant has provided a couple of slides. This is a survey of the property showing the buildings that are on the site. And then this is the renovations that they will be undertaking, again, to have residential units. And they do plan to have affordable units as part of these upstairs units. That's a big, important item for the family. And this renovation is a huge boost to King Street as well. So overall, it's looking like a really good project for the area. The staff and Planning Commission have recommended approval on this one. And I'll go back to our cover map just in case you've got any question about where the map is.
And no one has signed up to speak on this matter.
Move for approval.
I did. I'm sorry. This is Elaine Jenkins. I did sign up to speak.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
You may please proceed.
I'm sorry that it did not come through, but my name is Elaine Jenkins. I'm a member of the Jenkins family, also the attorney for the family. And I just wanted to speak briefly about what it is we want to do with this property. Several years ago, the Jenkins family decided that we wanted to redevelop the property, so we did not renew any of the leases on the property. It's all vacant right now, except for the King Street Mart, which leases the ground level of 571 King. And the owners of that mart, Ahmed and Sherry El Halawani, have been tenants there for 30 years. They're well known in that community, well liked in that community, and they're supported by the community. We also, when we decided we wanted to redevelop this property, we retained a structural engineering company to come and do an in-depth evaluation of the 3 buildings that sit on that lot to assess their structural integrity. And what we want to do is to repair and strengthen the foundation of each of those buildings. We are going to gut the interior of the 3 buildings and rebuild better by bringing all of the mechanical systems up to code, wiring the buildings to accommodate the new technology, utilizing green building practices and materials where feasible so as to reduce the carbon footprints of those buildings. There are 4 commercial units on the lower level, so after the renovation, they will remain more the same, their size and configuration. But the major changes are going to occur on the second level of the building. There is an unused attic in each of the 2-story buildings. And the family proposes to make 2 apartments on the second floor of each of those 2-story buildings, 1 efficiency apartment and 1 2- or 3-bedroom apartment by extending into the attic. And then the 3rd building is the 1-story building. We propose to create an efficiency apartment above the 1-story building. so that the second floor of those buildings will house 5 residential units in total instead of 2 as they are now. And that is why we applied to rezone the property from general business to mixed use to workforce housing.
Okay.
The family's vision for the 5 residential units is to designate 2 or more of them for affordable housing in keeping with the vision of our late parents for this property. We've assembled a good team to assist with this redevelopment project, and we're prepared to move forward if approved.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins.
Thank you.
Looks like a wonderful project, really does. Thank you for sharing with us. Any questions or comments from council? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Aye.
Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Morgan.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. The next 2 items can be taken together. One is a rezoning, and then the other is a zoning of newly annexed property. These are properties that are along Maybank Highway. The parcels for E3 are 279-0000056 and 057. And then the parcels for E4 are 279-0000055. That one is a 9.62 parcel, acre parcel, and the previous 2 comprise 37.29 acres. And for the rezoning, it's a rezoning from single family SR1 and SR4 to DR6. And for the zoning, it is taking property that was in Charleston County and zoning it as DR6. So it would all become DR6. And this was recommended for approval by the Planning Commission. I'm going to show you some images of the property. Of course, it's in our Century 5 plan. It's in our suburban designation. So this is in line with suburban designations along Maybank Highway. It's also in line with the new county overlays that call for up to 8 units an acre in these areas of Maybank Highway as well. Here is an aerial image of the properties. They're undeveloped at present. They are immediately adjacent to the Hayes Park development, which is here. And then also further to the east is additional land that the city is working to acquire through green space programs that's adjacent to our city park. And there would be connectivity from these parcels across, so people could be at these properties and go all the way over to the new park area without even having to get on Maybank Highway. They will also potentially be able to connect to other streets to the rear, depending on where wetlands are and things like that. So it's part of the whole connected system of Maybank Highway as called for in the Johns Island plan. Here is an image from the street view of the undeveloped property at present. Property across the street, church, up and down Maybank Highway to the east and to the southwest. And then the applicant has provided some slides. What they are proposing is a series of single family structures as well as some attached single family that would be rental. This is a new trend in the real estate world, and the applicants can explain it a little bit better, but we're seeing a lot of folks in the real estate world who would rather rent than own their own houses. And so these will be houses that will be helpful for that. And it leads to a kind of unified development pattern on the site. There is, as I mentioned earlier, connectivity to the north and potential for connectivity to the rear. And they are staying out of the wetlands with the exception of the crossing here that I believe is in the neighborhood of an existing crossing. The land is pretty high and good, as most areas along Maybank Highway are. These are some images that the applicant has provided, the types of housing they will build, 1- and 2-story housing with 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. There'll be lots of common green space. Sidewalks, of course, is required by our codes. Again, this shows the relationship of this development to the already approved and under construction Hayes Park development to the southwest as well. And the types of housing, again, showing in these images here from Hayes Park. So there's also a little bit of info from the applicant about how the current SR4 zoning is 14.3 units and is on 14.36 units, 14.36 acres, and it allows 10.9 units an acre. And then the SR1 is on 9 acres and allows 4.8 units an acre. When you factor all that in with the 6 units an acre under DR6, it actually is slightly lower density on the site from 262 units to about 207 units. So that is something that I think a lot of people who've looked at this issue have felt good about, and Planning Commission did as well. So that's the end of those slides. And again, staff and Planning Commission recommend approval of this request.
All right, thank you. Madam Clerk, did
Mr.
anyone?
Mayor? Yes, sir. We have 4 people signed up to speak. And did you want to set a time limit?
2 minutes, please.
All right, the first person is Jason Feister. If you're on the line or on Zoom.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here on behalf of Middleburg Communities. We're the developer pursuing this project. DJ Van Slambrook and Reese also had signed up to speak, but they're traveling and have not landed yet. So I don't believe that they are going to be joining us. We also have John Dangerfield here as well, who's our engineer. We're excited about the project. Happy to answer any questions.
Terrific. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask a question. How many affordable units would be part of this development?
Right now, we don't have any designated affordable units. We do have a program called, we have 2 programs that we use in our communities throughout the country. One is our Local Heroes program, where we designate a certain number of units for a reduced rent. And those units go to local heroes, first responders, teachers that live within a designated radius of the community. Mm-hmm. We also have another program, Shelters to Shutters, where we attack homelessness and with employment, and also with job training through our property management division.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
John Dangerfield.
Hey, how are y'all doing? My name's John Dangerfield with Dangerfield Engineering and Surveying. We're the civil engineers firm working with Middleburg Communities on this project. Jason did a great job of introducing the project, and just as some of the concerns that were brought up when we went through community neighbor meetings, where the wetlands, we're preserving the existing wetlands, we're utilizing an upland crossing that crosses from the one upland to the next to the rear of the site. We're utilizing existing upland to make that crossing. Another was the traffic. We have hired Beal Engineering, who is doing the traffic impact analysis for the adjacent site, Hayes Park. She's also doing our traffic impact analysis, and we'll address any concerns that come up in that traffic impact analysis. The other concern from neighbors were the stormwater. As y'all are aware, the city has adopted new stormwater regulations in July. This isn't a special protection area, and we are adhering to all those requirements. So there's going to be a lot of stormwater improvements on the site that will actually enhance the stormwater coming off of the site and reduce that flow from the site. Here to answer any questions you have. I think a very good point that the density that we're seeking does reduce the number of units on this site. But again, any questions y'all may have, we're here to answer those, and we thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
DJ Van Slambrook. And I think he may be traveling.
Yeah, him and Reese are not going to be joining us.
Those are all the comments that we had.
Great. The matter comes to council.
Move for approval 3 and 4.
Second.
Any discussion, Councilmember Brady, and then Griffin?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say briefly and thank Middleburg for including me in on their kind of initial conversations around this site, and also just engaging the community. It's one of the first development projects I've seen where the developer actually reached out to the neighbors to talk about what their vision was for the site and how they were going to be developing it. And I think that practice answered a lot of community questions up front before the matter had even gone before Planning Commission. And want to thank Middleburg for being involving those in the community. And it looks like a great project going forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Griffin?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Fundamentally, this is something that's come up previously that concerns me, that we rezone these properties before the traffic studies are completed. We just heard from the developer saying, yes, we're in the process of doing a traffic study, and those results will be out soon. So basically, we're going to rezone this property so that they can continue forward on a large scale development on Johns Island. And we still have yet to see what the traffic study looks like. That concerns me. And fundamentally, that's something that's come up several times since I've been on council, that we've rezoned these properties because it isn't, they can have these properties rezoned without giving us a traffic study. I'm always hesitant to rezone a property, especially a large scale. This is going to be a huge development on Johns Island on Maybank Highway. We have very limited amounts of infrastructure on Johns Island. We've got one way on and one way off pretty much. Well, two ways, Maybank and Maine. I'm concerned about that. So my question is, when will this traffic study be ready? Because I think that would be something that all of us would be interested in seeing, as well as definitely the people in the community. Because as soon as we approve this, then it's going to be a big headline that the city of Charleston just rezoned a significant portion of land on Johns Island for a major development. When will your traffic study be ready to go for us to take a peek at it?
Mr. Fleischer, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, and John, correct me if I'm wrong. I think, Councilman Griffin, I appreciate your question. I certainly understand your concern. And I believe it is pretty close to being ready. It'll certainly be ready by the time of the third reading. But what I can do is follow up either with Mr. Morgan or with you directly when I get a better sense of what that, I just don't want to kind of guess because I'm not exactly 100% certain when it is, but I know it's pretty close.
This is a first reading, correct?
That is correct, sir.
And if you don't mind, just to add to that, what this property is currently zoned, it will allow 268 single-family residents. So under current zoning, the traffic, if this project is developed under current zoning, the traffic impact will be much greater than the rezoning. So I know there's concerns about the rezoning of the parcel to go to multifamily. By rezoning it, you're actually going to reduce the potential traffic impacts. So what we're doing is we're actually reducing this to a maximum of 210 units. When 210 multifamily units are going to generate less traffic than if you compare it to 210 single-family residents, just because of the number of vehicles per residence. So not only from just a product site itself is going to reduce the traffic, but also from the number of units is going to be reduced. So by rezoning it, you actually will reduce the traffic impact just by product type.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Jackson? You're on mute, Councilmember.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you. And I do appreciate Councilmember Griffin's overall sentiments about when we're considering rezoning, that we do need to begin to take into consideration to a greater extent and as much as we're able to during a rezoning, the infrastructure impact and especially traffic in a place like Johns Island. I think we'd all figured out that this particular site is going to reduce the potential number of units compared to what the current zoning allows. So, but I do think that's a principle we should continue to watch. I want to support this conceptually in the way that it has been presented. And I know that we can't hold them to the concept and the layout and anything during a rezoning. But I do feel like this company, from what I understand, has a track record now of doing these kinds of housing communities that are meeting a need around the nation, and especially areas like ours that have, sort of gone in directions of creating exurbs and commuting nightmares and lifestyle challenges for people by allowing a lot of redevelopment in areas that are hard to reach and increasingly vulnerable to the protective devices that we know we need for flooding controls. So this kind of development is generically now called missing middle housing. It's the type of footprint and lifestyle that a lot of people are saying either in their empty nest retirement years or their startup years of smaller families where they want to be connected to cool stuff where they can live and work. I love the idea that this is connected to Boyd Hayes and potentially our park. I watched Boyd Hayes be reviewed over and over and over again by the Design Review Board and the community there. And they've done an excellent job also of respecting the land, the topography, the elements of climate impact that we know we need to be preserving, especially our trees and our natural vegetation. So I do hope that the company takes our early approval of the zoning and goes forward and makes it into the kind of development concept that you're showing us right now. I don't know if this needs to have a subdivision. Will that be true, Mr. Morgan?
It depends on how the final configuration of the property is done. I think in general, these developments are all one parcel because they are all commonly maintained and all. There may be, because of the need to have some public rights of way here, that there are a few lots that are created, but we're still working through that process.
That's the distinction between a property that's going to be subdivided for individual deeds and homeownership, right? Right. Compared to an all-inclusive rental property. Right. So I think we have a lot to learn about this. I'm happy for Councilmember Brady and people on Johns Island. And I do think that we should be learning as much as we possibly can for future locations as we look at our comp plan and keep going on improving our options for people to live. Thank you.
So I have one question myself, if I may. And Mr. Morgan, you mentioned, I think a couple of times, the potential for the connectivity from what I would call the rear of the property. And as noted in our Johns Island plan, connectivity is so important for traffic and mobility. So what changes that from the potential to a reality? Is that something that the developers are working on or committed to or hadn't worked out yet? What is the status on that?
Well, Mayor, I pulled up a slide here that shows kind of their concept so far for the property, which has a key connection that lines up with the connection that was here in Boyd Hayes, which also connects to the rear as well. They have roadways at the rear. Whether these are public or not has not been fully determined, but there would be the potential to allow for future connectivity to the rear, assuming that that is not a wetland area or like a grove of grand oaks or something like that. We look to create those connections where there's a logical location, but that would be part of a larger system. And given how they've gotten a access road across the back of the property here, there probably are a number of different locations that we could have that connectivity happen.
Yeah. So could I ask Mr. Feister and Dangerfield to respond? Have y'all looked into this? Are y'all planning on trying to make that happen?
The actual connectivity to Southwick Drive, which would be on the plan you're looking at, plan right. I feel that if you look at that site, there's been surveys done on that. I think there's a considerable wetland that separates that site from Southwick. I think the owner, Middleburg, is willing to provide connectivity, but as far as us completing that, there's a large privately owned tract between us and the areas to the right. We are making connectivity to Hayes Park, and that's what we're in the process of looking at potential future stub outs with the city of Charleston.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, that is correct. We'd certainly be willing to connect, but we don't own or control that land and are not in any negotiations to do so. And I think, like John said, I think we'd certainly be happy to connect, but I don't think it's a feasible, connection just for a topographic and environmental standards. But if someone wants to do it, we're happy to connect at a later date. We've planned for that.
All right, sir. Thank you for that response. Any other questions or comments? All in favor of first reading, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Morgan?
Okay, now we'll move to number E5, which is a portion of properties on St. Philip, Lion Street, King Street, and Ackerman's Court. There's also a corresponding rezoning that I'll show in the next slide. These are height district changes. This is the Courier Square property. It's owned by Evening Post Industries. This request for E5 is a change from the 2.5 to 3-story height district to the 3.5-story height district. And you'll notice there is a setback. I believe it's about a 30-foot setback from St. Philip Street. And we'll show some images in a minute that kind of point to why there is that setback. And this is all to make sure that the height is conducive to the traditional view of the neighborhood along St. Philip Street. But E5 is for a change for this area from 2.5 to 3, 2.5 to 3-story to 3.5-story. And then E6 is the adjoining piece of land that would go from 6 stories to 7 stories in the area that is shown crosshatched. So again, your 2.5 to 3 moving to 3.5 is in here. Then there's a jump up to 6 that already exists in this area here. And then the area that's crosshatched would potentially go to 7. Both of these were heard by Planning Commission a month ago and were recommended for approval. There is a corresponding change to the basic zoning on some of the property here that was held up for a month at Planning Commission and will be coming to you all next month. But this is just for the heights on these properties. And I'll show you some slides that help explain this further. This, of course, is in the Century 5 plan as our urban core. So that is the area that we do say that the greatest level of heights in the city are appropriate. Here is an outline of the overall project site here. Of course, it's parking lots for the Post and Courier and other undeveloped lots or previously developed lots that they own. Here is an aerial view looking from the St. Philip Street side towards King Street. There's the Post and Courier's printing plant. Here's a view from King Street of the property, another view from King Street of the property, a view at the corner of Line and St. Philip, and then from St. Philip on the southwest side, and residential in the corner of Ackerman's Court, and then residential on Line Street to give you context of what's up on the street frontage in these areas. And here's King Street looking south and Line Street looking west, and St. Philip and Ackerman's and St. Philip and Bogard. So the applicant has also given some slides that help to explain the height district change. Again, you've got the 30-foot setback from St. Philip Street. So the front 30 feet is just 2.5 or 3 stories. Then the change that they are requesting would go to 3.5 stories, 30 feet back. Then there would be a further break here in an area that's only allowed to go to 6 stories at present. And then there would be a change to 7 stories for this middle portion. And that is required to be 25 feet back from King Street in line with all the height districts that were recommended. It's also 133 feet back from Line Street. And this all helps to make that height less visible to the surrounding area. And I know that the applicants have worked very extensively with the surrounding neighborhood. And I think you'll hear from the neighborhood tonight about their work with the neighborhood on this. So the current allowable zoning envelope is for 6 stories in the center and 3 stories here. That's the maximum envelope that could be there. Their proposed mass with the current allowable zoning envelope is here with the 3 stories at the rear, or 3.5, and then 4 stories here and 6 stories through the middle of the project and a 4-story building at the corner of Line Street. What they would do with this rezone is to go up for that extra floor. They would have alleys that would be on the northern and western sides, and then they would have the 30-foot setbacks with courtyards along St. Philip Street. So again, the feel would be very much in keeping with the neighborhood. And this is the final kind of image of what the height request goes to: the 3.5 behind the 3-story buildings, the step to 4 rather than the 6 that is currently allowed, and then you would have 7 in this kind of H form here. And they would stay at 4 stories for their development on the corner and 3 stories for the development at the corner on Line Street. This is an overall
broader image of some of the other projects that are nearby, there is the Liberty Senior Housing that is going through BAR review starting soon that is proposed at 7 floors in this location. There's the existing student housing that goes up to 7 floors at the corner of Spring and King. There is the Courier Square Phase 1 that goes up to 8 floors on the other side of the Post and Courier printing plant. And then there is the Line Street development that is approved already through BAR for 9 stories over here. So again, very much in keeping with some of the buildings that are in this urban core area of the city. There's also a new 5-story office building under construction right here in this location of King Street. And this is a very important slide. It shows the view an average person would have from St. Philip Street looking back towards this development if these heights were approved. It shows how the 3-story buildings on St. Philip Street fronting would help to block the taller buildings to the rear, so that the perception as you're on St. Philip Street is that you're still in a 2 or 3-story type of zone that is very traditional to St. Philip Street. And here is the overall development plan, again, with the buildings that front on St. Philip, the larger building in the middle, the office up at the corner of Line and King, and other residential for 3 stories at Line and St. Philip Street. And that's the end of the applicant slides. And so both staff and Planning Commission recommended approval of these height changes for these 2 cases.
Great. Madam Clerk, did anyone sign up?
Yes, sir. We have 4 citizens who would like to speak. And the first, and I hope I'm not mispronouncing his last name, Ben Libetro, if you're on the line or if you're on Zoom.
Hey, Ms. Cook, can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Hey, Ben, how you doing?
I'm doing great. You actually did very well with my last name. I've heard far worse. Thank you very much. Mr. Morgan did a great job highlighting the project, but so I'll just maybe review a few highlights here. My name's Ben, representing Graystar. We're partnering with Evening Post Industries on this project. Same partnership and structure as the Courier 1 Phase 2 project, or I'm sorry, Phase 1 project. We're really proud of the staff support on this project. We've worked hand in hand with them to craft a unique height and a unique building strategy here. It was focused really on respecting our surroundings, creating kind of great pedestrian urban spaces, and following the city's design principles. We've essentially placed a lot of allowable perimeter height towards the interior of the site in less visible areas. We received no major comments or concerns on the height from Planning Commission. We were unanimously recommended there. And lastly, probably most importantly, Graystar and EPI have had extensive and ongoing dialogue over the past 5 to 6 months. That goes with the city, the mayor's office, and particularly our surrounding neighborhoods and neighbors. Those have been very positive. We're extremely proud of the support that we've been able to garner from the Canonburgh, Elliott Borough neighborhood. We're proud of the city's support. As you all know, Canonburgh, Elliott Borough, it's a very smart, knowledgeable, very engaged neighborhood. We are requesting additional height next to a very dynamic group, and we've gained their support. That's hard to come by these days on sensitive issues. So I think by working hand in hand with them, we've addressed a number of their concerns, livability issues that have come about in this rapidly developing part of town. And that's resulted in strong support. We've been a very unique approach, healthy. It's been transparent. It's been open. And so while not directly related to this height request, we've really uniquely addressed a number of their livability concerns, I think, by going really above and beyond to meet a number of their requests and concerns. So we greatly appreciate your consideration here. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Ben.
Justin Schwebler, if you're on the line, if you could press *6, or if you're joining by Zoom.
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yes,
Mr. Mayor and members of council, I'm Justin Schwebler, representing Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has had the opportunity to meet with the Courier Square team and review the project proposal. We've been in ongoing discussion with them and are appreciative of the ability to weigh in on this project. We applaud the team for their recent announcement at Planning Commission that they intend to incorporate permanent workforce housing on the site, in addition to paying the entire fee in lieu. This level of commitment to affordable housing is unprecedented and highly commendable. However, Historic Charleston Foundation does believe that the current allowable height districts are appropriate for this site and opposes the rezoning to allow for additional height. For a portion of the site fronting St. Philip Street, the proposal increased from 2.5 to 3.5 stories with the stated intention to request 4 stories from BAR for architectural merit is not appropriate for this historic neighborhood. The houses in the surrounding neighborhood to the west and the north are predominantly 2 and 2.5 story houses. There are historic properties located on the Courier Square Phase 2 site, and it's particularly important that the height scale be sensitive to these houses. 3 of these properties on St. Philip's are protected by Historic Charleston Foundation easements and covenants, and in order to properly scale to the neighborhood and relate to existing historic homes, this section of the property is appropriately zoned in the current 2.5 to 3 height district and should remain as such. The rezoning request and classification from 6 to 7 stories for the central portion of the site with the stated intention to request 8 stories from BAR for architectural merit is not appropriate for the site either. While this property is located within the urban core and is within the area of the peninsula deemed to be the spine, the peak of the spine's height is actually located to blocks spanning between King and Meeting Streets. The spine should then taper downward in height into the blocks to the east and west. Because this site was west of King Street and adjacent to the Canonburgh-Elliottboro neighborhood, it's appropriately zoned at its current height district of 6 stories. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you, sir.
Next is Marion Hawkins.
Marion, you're on mute, Marion.
Mayor Tecklenburg, council members, my name is Marion Hawkins, president of the Canonburgh-Elliottboro Neighborhood Association. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I would echo Ben's comments. We have been very impressed by the transparency and engagement from Great Star and Eating Post Industries with the neighborhood. This has been an ongoing discussion for several months. It started with initial meetings with directly adjacent residents to the property and the project area. And after several meetings with adjacent neighbors and property owners, as well as with the neighborhood, and also after a presentation at our neighborhood meeting, we voted unanimously to approve the project. I will say we have major concerns regarding this wall be probably even more discussed at the next meeting, but next council meeting. But with this whole entire project area is zone GB and will be, if approved, be MU1, MU2, which will allow for STR use. Also, the MU2 along King Street will allow for late night overlay use. And also, we have the same concerns with having more affordable housing for our neighborhood and for the city. And with all 3 requests, Gray Star and EPI have met us and have really reached out, and we appreciate that. They have decided to not allow any late night operations from 12 a.m. to 5 a.m. in the MU2 area. Also, the STR has, they have agreed to put in a deed restriction for 20 years moratorium on STR use, even though the stated use of the whole project with the with increased housing units will not.
Time.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Marion.
Next is Brian Turner. And if you're on the line, if you could press *6, or if you're joining on Zoom, Brian Turner.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the Preservation Society of Charleston. And I just want to commend the applicant here. They reached out to us early and committed to ensuring great public benefit. The compatibility of uses that's been discussed, and additions to the city's workforce housing, permanent additions are really commendable. Nonetheless, the height and mass will be highly impactful for this neighborhood. Rezoning to 7 stories across the street from the 2 to 3 story context of the neighborhood is cause for concern, particularly because we expect the applicant to seek an 8th floor for architectural merit at the BAR. I'd like to make 3 brief points. First, the parcel was recently rezoned from 55 feet up to 6 stories, and this determination was based on extensive study and community input. This would be a further deviation from that decision. Second, the city's approach to height in the urban core has thus far been to locate the tallest buildings between King and Meeting and taper down height east and west in areas adjacent to the 2- and 3-story historic buildings. And lastly, Council recently gave first reading to add language to section 54306 of the zoning code to clarify that compatibility with surrounding properties is a key focal point when evaluating height district rezoning requests. So in sum, and with sincere respect to the applicant, we ask that you deny the request, given that the heights proposed would be out of scale with the context of the site. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
And those were all the speakers that we had.
Great. It comes to council, Councilmember Mitchell, then Shade, then Griffin. Councilmember Mitchell.
You muted.
I got it now.
There you go.
I was at the various neighborhood meetings, all but, well, a couple of times when the developer came and explained what they're planning on doing. And they had a lot of discussion back and forth with the neighborhood association and with the residents in the area. And it was a long dialogue, and they went along with the neighborhood and doing certain things and not having certain things that the neighborhood wanted, so far as late night establishment on between Line and Spring Street, and not having bars that stay up until 2 o'clock and all this. So they came up with this agreement, and they came up with the understanding that these things are going to be put in place, and the neighborhood association was satisfied with it. And that's why they went wholeheartedly to support it. And I was there. So when I met with them more than one time, also pertaining to it, I went strictly along with the neighborhood to make sure that the neighborhood agreed with it, and with the community around agreed with it. And they all agreed, didn't have anyone speaking against it. So I said, well, since you're doing that and you all are satisfied, then I'm satisfied, and I'm going to vote to approve it. And that's what I'm saying, that I'm going to vote to approve it, because they did the due diligence by going to the neighborhood more than one time and addressing the issues that the neighborhood had, and went along with the neighborhood with the compromising, and they did a good job on it. And Mr. Hawkins, who's the neighborhood president, as he's alluded to, that they have things in place that they promised to do, and I think it's already in writing that they're going to do these things. So I'll vote to approve it.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Shade.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Morgan, would you mind going back to that slide that sort of showed that sliding height differential?
Is that the slide?
That one right there. Yeah. So we're talking about an improving item 5 and number 6 from going from a 2.5 to 3-story to another 3.5 story. So you're talking about a half story, and that would be facing the what's shown on here. That would be where on this this particular slide.
Right in this area here.
The green area.
The green area right there. And then the same thing with the 6 to 7 would be in this area. And I think your comment earlier was being in this core area of the city, this is where the planners have decided it's okay to have this higher height for these developments. Did I hear you correctly on that?
That's correct. And there were some statements about the greater heights being between King and Meeting, and there is more allowance for height between King and Meeting. But the feeling in this area has been that, you know, if it could be of a scale that is not, you know, duly perceived from the street, you know, like St. Philip Street, to passersby on St. Philip Street, or on King. And again, on King, you've got the setback here, the 25 feet, that helps to shroud the taller building as well. So that's why we were comfortable with this. And again, the heights they're talking about here are not as great as the heights between King and Meeting.
That's why I just wanted to make sure I heard that correctly. And so this seems like this is a good compromise in what Councilmember Mitchell had just relayed to us, and what the community has been engaged with this process. And they have received certain concessions based upon their support, and Councilmember Mitchell has sort of spearheaded. So, I mean, this sounds like a good result when you look at it from a bird's eye. That's why I looked at this slide. You're given a bird's eye view of what this is going to look like. This seems like a good result for the community and for the folks who got this plan. So appreciate those comments that I heard earlier about that. Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, we don't have a motion or a second on the floor right now.
I move.
Make the motion.
Okay, we have a motion to approve and a second.
Second.
Thank you. Councilmember Griffin and then Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Councilmember Mitchell, let me start off by saying I never, ever like to vote against you because you have the best perspective. You get down and meet with your constituents and nobody does that better than you, sir. I have a little different reason why I have some reservations here tonight. Number one, I look at who the applicant is. Even Post Industries, one of the biggest community partners throughout the city, the Post and Courier, their parent company. And I have to think back to Courier Square. And one thing that really disappoints me about Courier Square is the lack of affordable housing. They are a fee in lieu kind of partner. They would rather pay the fee. And I just want to give you an example of what's happened. To prepare for this meeting tonight and this rezoning, I looked at the Guild, which is a Gray Star development, which was the first phase of Courier Square. Let me just explain to you what a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, it's 1,495 square feet, and it's being marketed for $8,520 a month in rent. That is ridiculous. The fact that we have units like that, that are that expensive, we are setting a precedent here that developers can come in, pay a fee in lieu, not make affordable housing, and then spike our rents up to the point where who on earth can pay $8,000 a month in rent? For that reason, I hold our community partners to a higher standard. And, you know, we're talking about raising the fee in lieu. We're talking about a lot of other things right now. I feel like the only person that gains from this is the applicant. We gain nothing as a city from this. And I expect more out of our community partners. So for that reason, tonight, I'm voting against it.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, everyone who's offered your opinions about this. I do join Councilmember Griffin in my concern. I watched the Planning Commission. I watched, I think, both Planning Commissions, the first one when they asked to defer this issue for another explanation about the workforce housing changes to the fee in lieu and the structure that we are going to be considering very soon. And then I watched this past week when the Planning Commission gave 100% approval to both the height and the rezoning. So when I saw that only the height was coming through for rezoning this evening, I asked Mr. Morgan to explain to me how that could be possible, first of all, and then why would the developer want to do it in 2 parts like this. He said it is possible because it's basically the option of the owner to ask for when their rezoning is heard once it's gone past the Planning Commission. And he didn't really have, he didn't know, he couldn't answer the question. No one had been able to tell him why it's being separated into 2 different votes by our council. I mean, I agree with Councilmember Griffin and everybody who said that this, this partnership between Evening Post and Gray Star couldn't be more favorable for a city that's come to rely on those kinds of local property owners combined with people who have established themselves with their headquarters here in Charleston and obviously, love to bring new products to their own community. So on that, theoretical basis, we have 2 great applicants that are asking for these rezoning decisions. But until we have an actual site plan and going through that, this is a trusting relationship. And I think we should be willing to trust the word of these partners. On the other hand, I don't understand why they feel like they need the height right now. What if worst case, for some reason, we decided not to award the MU2 designation, then they would have the height for GB product. And I don't know what that would mean if in terms of the owners willing to develop under a GB designation, or if they would look around for new buyers. So to me, these have been delivered together, these two different types of rezoning to the height and to the MU. I don't really see what the rush is. I would hope that maybe we could defer this vote tonight as a first reading, or at least agree that we're not going to give second and third reading to this request until we've been able to deliberate on the MU2 zoning. I also was very careful to pay attention to the answer that the developer gave the Planning Commission last week about their new offer to pay 100% of the fee in lieu, essentially under the old price that we currently have on our zoning code, and then set aside workforce units that would be permanently affordable at a workforce income range, but they would not designate how many units they plan to do. And the answer that they gave to 2 or 3 different questions about that was, well, they're working it through with the housing department and our planners. And I think that's fair. That's fair. They don't have to know right away. But again, why would we want to give away opportunities to developers who haven't really, been able to put all of their cards on the table in giving us the best deal to say yes to. So those are my 2 reasons. I would love to see a deferral tonight of these 2 particular votes. If we can't do that, then I think I'm going to have to join Councilmember Griffin and reluctantly vote no, because I know this has been properly vetted throughout the neighborhood. I agree that Canonburgh, Elliotboro are sets of citizens who do their homework and don't say their support easily without kind of consensus building. And certainly Member Mitchell, has followed along with us from the point of his constituents and our own responsibility as council people.
Thank you, Councilmember Appel, and then I'll come back to you, Councilmember Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And, when we talk about affordable housing, y'all are going to get sick of me saying this, but it's just the truth. Price is a product of supply and demand. We've got high prices right now because we don't have enough supply. We have to find a way to get more housing of all types built in the city. In my opinion, I like seeing this a lot more than I like seeing dense developments on Johns Island or James Island or West Ashley. This is exactly where you want to go high and you want to go tall and you want to go dense in a city. It makes perfect sense for a development of this kind in this place. I do see the logic in trying to have a better understanding of what's coming in here and not, rezoning piecemeal. I would just say to that, we have a tool in the city for us to have a much better, clearer, more defined understanding of what we're getting when we do a rezoning, and it's a PUD. A PUD presents all kinds of benefits for developers and also the city to get a much clearer understanding of not only what the uses are going to be, how high they're going to be, but what they're going to look like, what the layout is going to be. And I just throw that out there as a tool. I mean, there's no reason that I know why affordable housing and workforce housing can't be negotiated and built into that PUD framework as well. I'm not suggesting we need to do that here. I mean, it sounds like these folks have been working very hard on this for a long period of time, but that's something for us to keep in mind as we move forward. I think that what I've been hearing from my colleagues today, whether it be on this matter or the one that we just looked at on Johns Island, is, when you're just rezoning to, base zoning districts and very broad zoning categories, we do have no idea what's going to come in there at this stage. That's not how the system is set up. The PUD is the only method that we have currently on the books under South Carolina law for us to have a much clearer understanding of what we're getting in exchange for the rezoning. And I just throw that out there for consideration. But y'all, if we're going to ever make serious headway on affordable housing in this city, if we're ever going to make serious headway on the traffic nightmares we used to experience coming on and off the peninsula every morning, whether it be on Johns Island, James Island, West Ashley, we are going to have to start getting very comfortable with tall buildings, dense developments on the peninsula. And at the end of the day, guys, we are not the Soviet Union central planning what people's prices can be on units. At some point, the market is going to have to dictate what the cost of housing is. Right now, we have a market problem caused by, in a lot of ways, the not intentional, but the negative consequences of our zoning policies that has made it difficult to build on the peninsula. And we're stuck with situations where we have a affordable housing crisis where we need, what, 20,000 more units to start making progress on this issue. It's very simple. It's either we grow out or we grow up. And I would take the latter every day in that equation.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Mitchell.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I understand my colleagues. I heard what they were saying, but I have, like I said, I have met with the developers on various occasions, more than one occasion, even at the neighborhood association. If you know the Ellery Canonburgh Neighborhood Association, they don't let anything pass. They have people there in that neighborhood association that really, really go through everything before things are passed, approved there in that particular area. And all that area we are talking about right on St. Philip Street, 9th Street, King, that's what I grew up in. I know the area. It has changed. My ex-father-in-law had owned everything on St. Philip Street there. And I think the mayor might know about it. Pete's Grill and Pete's Eldorado Room and all the houses and all along that area where they're planning on building. But the developer, we are working with them with the affordable housing piece. We just have not bringing that back up to date because this is only dealing with the rezoning. There will be housing in there, and there will be a part of the fee in lieu there along with it. But there will be affordable units that are going to be placed in there, and it will be placed in there perpetuity for 100 years. Today, we are just dealing with the part of the rezoning. You will hear more about that. They're working with Gion's office, and they're working with me with so far as the affordable housing piece is concerned. That's why I'm saying, and that's why I came wholeheartedly in supporting them, because otherwise I wouldn't support it either. But that's why I'm supporting them, because I know what's coming forth so far as the affordable housing piece and the deed in lieu restriction that's going to be there. And this is what they're planning on doing, and we're putting those things in writing. But right now, today, we are dealing with only the height. And that's why the neighborhood association, along with the community, they were satisfied with the height, where it's going through and how it was presented more than one time at the neighborhood association. So that's why I'm going along with it. So I understand what my colleagues are saying, and it's their choice, but this is why I'm saying, and this is an area that I represent. This is an area I'd be down right there with my neighborhood association. If anybody knows me, I'm always there at my neighborhood association meeting. I'm always there to make sure that things are going to be done properly and be done correctly. And that's what I do. Everyone have their own opinion, but this is what I do for my community. If they said no, and I'm hearing things, and if I understand it and I'm not satisfied with it, I'll tell them no. And that's why I said this is why it is coming the way it's coming now, with a separate piece. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Waring, and then we'll come back to Councilmember Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Listen, I think this is a fabulous conversation. Everybody's rolling up their sleeve and bringing their best game to the table. If our planning commission had voted, 4-3 on this one, I'd probably have a little bit more of a question mark. But it was a unanimous vote, and we know the due diligence that they do when it comes to planning the city. A couple of years ago, before the prior election, the city changed the parking requirement from 1.5 per unit to 1. because that would get, frankly, more dense units in line with where mass transit would be in this city. In the day of Uber and alternative transportation, certainly I go to church on St. Philip Street, and I think that's Grand Central for bike traffic going to and fro from the College of Charleston. I'm going to support Councilman Mitchell on this, and I think Councilman Appel is right when it comes to a PUD. We need to relook and rethink, because some of the information we want, plan unit developments requires all of that information to be provided by the developer upfront prior to any vote being taken place. Short of that, bringing it through in pieces, frankly, I think provides more due diligence on behalf of the Planning Commission, our staff, the community, as well as this council. We don't have to deal with the zoning, the height, and all of that at the same time. It is odd to do it that way. I think this is one of the first times I've ever seen it done that way. But frankly, it enabled us to ratchet down on the decision-making a whole lot better. So I'm gonna support this, because if density is gonna go on the peninsula, King Street, Meeting Streets, certainly two of the main corridors that run from one length of the peninsula all the way to the interstate. So this is the place for it to go. So I will, I hear you, Councilman Griffin, 8,000 a unit. There's no doubt about it. I won't be leasing that unit. But maybe somebody from Connecticut will. So my one question is, why is it that and I hope this isn't correct, well, the new fee in lieu that we voted on, why would that not be applicable to this development? Because the zoning isn't in place yet, it isn't finalized. Can anybody tell me if the new fee in lieu would be applicable to this development?
I'm going to let Mr. McQueenie respond to that.
Councilman Waring, that depends on what City Council wants to do. If they want to, at final reading of the ordinance, ensure that it applies to applications that are pending, they can do so. If they want to have it apply to application or rezonings as of March 9th, they can do so. But I think that's in the discretion of City Council. And, it's also in your discretion. I will note we had that earlier rezoning tonight that was after March 9th. So, the final version of the ordinance may change, may decide whether or not that is included under the new or the old ordinance. But I think it's still in the discretion of council until the ordinance is adopted. You don't have a vested right to rezone. So Courier Square is not in a situation where they have a vested right to continue under the current version of the ordinance. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. McQueen. So if we wanted to be inclusive with the previous project as well as this one, what would be the action step?
You would, at second reading, you would ensure that the ordinance is effective as to all zonings that have, all applications, or excuse me, I think right now it uses a March 9th date, but you could change that if you wanted to all, so that it applies to all projects except zonings, projects that have been rezoned prior to second reading. So that if this project is at second reading and is still being rezoned, then the new ordinance would apply. I think the developer sort of came with the idea that they wanted to do, number one, permanent affordable housing on site. Number one, permanent affordable housing, and number two, affordable housing on site. That's what they represented to Planning Commission they wanted to do. But I think that was under the understanding that the old ordinance would apply, and Planning Commission was comfortable with that. But I've been pretty consistent in talking with them and anybody else who's asked me that it's up to council and that there's no vested right to rezone under the current ordinance.
Okay, is that second reading in front of us tonight?
That will be, I think there'll be a public hearing on that on April, first meeting in April. It may be the second meeting in April.
That's great. We have time to circle back on that. Then.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for that explanation. I'm gonna support this moving forward. We'll circle back with Mr. McQueenie on that second reading.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr.
Anybody else with the first comment? If not, we'll go back to Councilmember Griffin.
Yes, sir. I am compelled from Councilmember Mitchell's comments to go follow his lead on this. And I think Councilmember Appel had some great points as well about we're kind of dealing with the lesser of two evils here. But at the end of the day, if we're willing to give up some height, then we need Evening Post Industries to be willing to pay the new fee in lieu. So, we all have to give a little bit if we want to take a little bit. And, I think that would be the right thing to do. But I'm going to follow your lead, Councilmember Mitchell, and I hope in these next couple of weeks, maybe you can get some more info to me about what they're looking to do affordable housing wise. I'd love to hear what their plan is in terms of affordable housing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Councilmember Griffin. Any other questions or comments? And I'll just add that I want to thank Ben with Gray Star and Evening Post Industries for working with us on that issue. And as mentioned, there's more discussion to come on the affordability for this project at our next meeting when we consider the MU zoning. I hear Councilmember Appel and Waring about the PUD. I do think in this case, they are proposing a mixed use development that includes retail, office, and residential. So the MU zoning was what that was tailored for as well. So this has moved far along with their plans that I think it fits the MU zoning. Of course, we'll talk more about that next time. And regarding the height, even though it is not the block between King and Meeting, the highest part of the proposed development is closer to the King Street side. And as the drawing shows from St. Philip Street, the angle of it is not obtrusive. I guess the 3-story buildings along St. Philip Street will kind of hide the building. So I think it's appropriate for this location and plan to support it. And we'll continue the conversation, but I want to thank them for working with Gianna and the housing department on an affordable proposal that I think will be positive. So hearing no other comments or questions, I'll call the question. All in favor of this matter on numbers, what are we at here?
5 and 6.
Numbers 5 and 6, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much, everyone. And back to Mr. Morgan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now this is item E7. This is a code amendment for the zoning ordinance to allow to add to the table of permitted uses utility scale battery storage facilities as a principal use and allow this to be a permitted use within light industrial and heavy industrial zoning districts. It did get recommended for approval by staff and planning commission. I know, Mayor, you had some questions, and we heard through the folks that were interested in pursuing this that they are not moving as fast as they thought they would be. So if council wanted more discussion, they could come to a future meeting with this item and give more background on this if council's interested in that.
All right, Madam Clerk, did anyone sign up to be heard on this?
No, sir, no one has signed up for this matter.
All right. Then the matter comes before council. Correct, I had asked a little more explanation about, the intended use that this would permit. I really didn't get any definitive answers back other than what Mr. Morgan just shared. So if no one minds, I would like to entertain a motion to defer to allow them to bring us back some more information about what the intended use is. I didn't want to have a blanket approval and not know what kinds of batteries. I know for sustainability purposes, we're going to have to allow more types of batteries and facilities and charging stations and all like that. But I just thought it would be.
I second your motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I'll make the motion.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from councils? We have a motion to defer. All in favor, please say aye.
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 The ayes have it. Mr. Morgan?
Okay. E8 is a recent annexation in Riverland Terrace. It's at 2181 Wapu Hall Road on James Island. It's 1/3 of an acre lot. It would come into the city as SR1.
No one has signed up to speak on this matter.
Move for approval.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion, questions? All in favor, please say aye.
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 The ayes have it.
Okay.
Mr. Morgan?
E9 is adjacent to the previous one. It's at 2182 Parkway Drive in Riverland Terrace. And it is a request for SR2 because it's a smaller lot and couldn't meet the SR1 standards. There's already a house on the property. I can show you an image of the property. There you go. So the house fills up most of that area on the property, and that's why it wouldn't have worked for SR1 and it needs to be SR2.
No one has signed up to speak on this
Move
matter.
for approval.
Second.
Questions, Councilmember Appel?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the rush to join Council District 11 continues apace here. I just wanted to mention, this is in Riverland Terrace, which is obviously an iconic neighborhood in the city and James Island. And, one of the things we talked about at our Ways and Means Committee, and we're going to be talking about again during full council, is this revised non-standard service agreement with Dominion, AKA burying power lines. The people in Riverland Terrace love their trees. If you've ever been through Riverland Terrace, you know what I'm talking about. Unfortunately, and this blows most people's minds, the vast majority of the properties in Riverland Terrace are in the county. They are not in the city of Charleston. And long story short, it is complicated to do these undergrounding projects in the donut hole scenario, because I learned today that Charleston County doesn't have a non-standard service agreement. And in fact, state law prohibits them from having one. So if there weren't already a plethora of, reasons to join the city, lower tax bills, lower rates at the municipal golf course, among many other reasons, the more homes and more properties we can get annexed into the city of Charleston in Riverland Terrace will make it easier for us to greenlight some of these small scale non-standard service projects in Riverland Terrace. So I just want to point that out there because we're going to be talking about that today. And it's very exciting to see us ever so slowly, but in a determined manner, begin to bring Riverland Terrace into the city. Thanks.
Great. Thank you.
And Councilmember Shade and Jackson have their hands up.
Okay, Councilmember Shade.
Yes, sir. I just want to thank Councilmember Appel for my ongoing argument as to why we need to be more aggressive in closing these donut holes in these subdivisions, these neighborhoods. This is a classic example of inefficient government management when we have to fuss off with the county on these inconsistent rules and ordinances. So here's a perfect example that Councilmember Appel just relayed to us to getting all of these communities into the city, and why we need to be pushing a little bit harder on it. So thanks for bringing that back up, Councilmember Appel. Appreciate the comments.
Thank you. Can I, Councilmember Jackson.
Thanks. I just want to give a shout out to the two property owners that we've now just given the rezoning to. I think we sort of missed the boat when they were annexed. They weren't told that they were been annexed in, and so they were looking forward to having reasons to celebrate coming into the city. I'm privileged to know the owners of the Hurley Living Trust. They're some of my best friends from my college years, and the owner of the house is the owner of Jack's Cosmic Dog over on 17. We We lost him for Folly Road some years ago when his partners bought out and created the beer hall, which is also very popular. Anyway, these, and I know that they sold a little bit of subdivision to the owners on Parkway who built the brand new house. And together, they're already organizing their community to do great things with Troy Miller's leadership for Riverland Terrace. So I think Councilmember Appel has gotten 2 great brand new constituents. They love to hold neighborhood parades and serve hot dogs. So let's go for it. Thanks.
And I'm going to pile on with another factoid about coming into the city. So you save on your taxes, you get a better rate at the muni, you save on your water bill. We all knew that as well. But here's a new one I found out that, and many people now, work out of their homes. If you have a business that you operate out of your home and you do business in the city of Charleston, so you need a city of Charleston business license, you will save substantially on your business license if you bring your residents into the city of Charleston as well. So there's another way to save money. All right. Any other comments or questions? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. So, Mr. Morgan, one more.
And E10 is also on James Island and Riverland Terrace on Gulfview Drive, and that is a property coming in at SR1.
And fantastic. Any comments, questions, citizens?
No, sir. No one has signed up to speak on this matter.
Oh, great.
Move for approval.
Move for approval.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, Mr. Morgan, for walking us through all of those tonight. Thank you. Appreciate it. Next up is our approval of city council
Move for
minutes.
approval.
Second.
Councilmember Griffin.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to let the record reflect that the item that I asked to be put on the agenda for tonight is reflected in the minutes correctly. I wanted to go back and make sure that was the case. I had asked for an up or down vote in regards to the federal stimulus money. I see here that it's listed as a discussion item, which is not what I asked for. So I just want that to be clear as we vote on the minutes. The minutes are correct. The agenda for tonight is not. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All in favor of approval of the minutes, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next is our citizens participation period.
And
Madam Clerk, will you please lead us through that?
yes, sir. And Mr. Mayor, if I could just go back, 114 Magnolia Road, it is deferred on your agenda, but it was advertised and we did not have anyone sign up to speak on that public hearing. That was E11, but it was deferred.
Correct. And no one signed up to speak on it, correct?
No, sir.
We would have been glad to have them speak if they had. Thank you.
And we have 7 people signed up to speak tonight. Did you want to have a time limit?
Yeah, let's maintain the 2 minutes we've been working on this evening. Thank you.
All right, the first speaker is Tony Daniel. And if you're on the line, if you could press *6, Tony Daniel.
Good evening, council members and mayor. And hello, Ross. How you doing? I look forward to any kind of email you send me after you get out of the executive session. I'm calling once again. It's nice. It's exciting to hear all these questions about connectivity. And you're looking at developing a neighborhood, got multiple ways in and out until they decide in the neighborhood to close 2/3 of the way ins and out. And then what makes it worse is they go before city council and say, hey, we'd like to close the roads. City council says, no, you don't meet the requirements of the 2 court cases to close the roads that I've listed in the comments. And then Councilmember Stevens in the 1976 meeting said, we are not closing the road. We're going to barricade the road. Can there be any question about what they're doing? Because he said specifically, we're not closing, we're not abandoning, we're barricading. And what happened? Roads were closed and trees were planted. Then talk about traffic flow plans. The school across the street expanded in 2014. They submitted a traffic flow plan. Failed. Then I was part of James Island that was not in the city. And we entered the city excited. because we expect that the traffic codes to be enforced. We expect the traffic laws to be enforced, and they're not being enforced. People are parking in the crosswalks. People are jamming private driveways. My neighbor across the street can't get his work truck out. I'm asking you to take a serious look at what's happened in my neighborhood that I represented for 4 months. And my father had a stroke and was impeded by EMS. And please do something to just enforce the codes that are on the books, enforce the traffic codes, remove the trees, put up a barricade, and we could talk about removing the barricade. Come up with some options. I've got 4 different ways of fixing this problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Next is Miguel Torres. And if you're on the line, if you could press *6, Miguel Torres. All right, next is Muhammad Idris. And if you're on the line, if you could press *6.
Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
sir.
This is Miguel Torres. I've been trying to come in.
Okay,
I'm
we
sorry.
got you now. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you, sir. I also live in the country club too, and my concern is similar to Mr. Daniels. I'm also impacted by the traffic that's on Burning Tree Road, which actually blocks my driveway 2 times a day. On the weekends, the speeding, people using the 1 avenue in, 1 avenue out, which is Frampton and Burning Tree. There's no police enforcement of the law over here whatsoever. People are driving down this road, doing anywhere from 30, 35 miles an hour at a time. Mr. Pell stated he was going to do a traffic study for us 4 months ago. We're still waiting on that. I guess he's kind of busy. Also, just the noise and nobody abiding to any rules or any signage that has been placed. I want to know why we can't have the same signage as they do in the other portion of our neighborhood. All we're asking is for fair and equitable treatment. We pay the same taxes and should be treated the same. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Muhammad Idris, if you're on the line, if you could press *6, Muhammad Idris. Greta Anderson, if you're on the line, if you could press *6, Greta Anderson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good
It's
evening.
Greta Anderson calling once again to see if you guys have decided to do anything about the hate group that assembles at the Battery every weekend. We've asked multiple times for you guys to stop issuing permits to this group, or to possibly change the park to make it a no protest zone, or to even ban the flagpoles. The good news is we made it through last weekend's protest without anyone getting assaulted, so that's great. Also, the invitation still stands for each of you to join us at the Battery anytime this Sunday from 9:30 to noon to see for yourself the hate and division this group causes with tourists and locals alike. That's basically all I have to say tonight. Please look into this and please join us this weekend. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And I'm going to go back. I think Muhammad Idris is on the line. Mr. Idris, if you could press *6.
Mohammed, can you press the star symbol, and then 6 on your phone?
Yes,
There you go. We got you.
this is Muhammad Idris.
Yes, sir.
Evening, Mayor and City Council. Nice speaking to you all.
We've missed you. Where you been?
I've been absent, without leave. So don't punish me. Okay, I'm calling to in reference to Zoom, and wanting to know when we are going to come back to meeting on a regular basis. Since we have been asked to take off the masks and everything, I wanted to know when we are coming back. And I miss you all too. And I like to see your faces. So I'm trying to find out when we are going to be coming back to the regular meeting.
Well, thank you, Mohammed. As you know, this isn't really a question and answer period. We're just glad to be hearing from you. But council hadn't decided that for sure yet, and I think we'll take it up again at our next meeting in April.
Okay, well, I'll say this as Zoom. I wanted to speak about Zoom. You know, if you take off M from Zoom, you got zoo. And we don't want to be in the zoo. We want to be in the city of Charleston and go to the zoo. So I'm calling to be saying that these buildings that is going up, we were told years ago that they wouldn't go no higher than 3 feet, three stories, pardon me, 3 stories high. And we were told that over and over again. And the record will show that the citizens were told, they told the city council that Charleston is becoming a little New York with these high buildings and everything that is being built down here. And we know why someone says better to go up than to go out. And the reason why the people are going to have to go up, because people on these other little area now, they want to own their own area and they want to take control of their own area. So they are fighting against being annexed into the city of Charleston. This is what is going on right now. And I agree with Councilman Griffin, for what he's saying. And I pray that I will be able to speak to you all more. And may God continue to bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed.
Justin Schwebler, if you're on the line, if you could press *6.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor and members of council, this is Justin Schwebler again with Historic Charleston Foundation. On behalf of HCF, I speak in support of the renewal of the emergency ordinance relaxing the off-street parking requirements in the central business district along King Street, which is item 6 on this evening's agenda. HCF believes this ordinance has already been an important catalyst in attracting retail and commercial tenants to vacant street-level spaces along King Street, and was reported to the Central Business District Improvement Commission at their Friday meeting. However, there's still need for the ordinance, as there are a number of vacant spaces yet to be activated. Renewal of the emergency ordinance is also important as the city evaluates a possible permanent relaxation of parking requirements, as so many cities across the country have done. Respectfully, HCF encourages you to vote in favor of this renewal of the ordinance this evening. Thank you all.
Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Next is Rita Kazurskis. If you're on the line, if you could press *6. Rita Kazurskis.
Good evening. Happy 100th birthday to Mr. Dudley's mom to start with. And I'd like to ask you all, please, for, again, even though I can't see a show of hands, please, how many of you are aware that the city of Charleston permitted a group to gather last weekend with the express purpose of publicly breaking the law by refusing to wear face masks? Why are you issuing permits to a group that announces they will break the law? If 500,000 people were dead, the city's response to COVID would be laughable. We need to do better. Let's move on to other issues. A few days ago, 8 people were murdered in Atlanta, Georgia. And yesterday, 10 were murdered in Boulder, Colorado. I saw a news story that Facebook closed his account to limit his reach because sometimes when people see others glorifying these horrific actions, they become encouraged to do the same. I repeat, when people see others glorifying these horrific actions, they become encouraged to do the same. I'm sure many of us are reminded of June 17, 2015. Reverend Clementa Pinckney was 41. Reverend Sharonda Coleman Singleton was 45. Reverend Daniel Simmons was 74. Cynthia Hurd was 54. DePayne Middleton Doctor was 49. Myra Thompson was 59. Susie Jackson was 87. Her cousin Ethel Lance was 70. And Tawanza Sanders was only 26. Well, Facebook at least closed an account to try to reduce the spread of dangerous hate. Here in Charleston, where white terror is the heritage that literally runs in bloodlines, every single week at the Battery, the city continues to turn a blind eye and issue permits to a group that already attacked a man with a flagpole, just so they can continue waving their flag of Dylan Roof. Fans of this awful weekly display have not only decided it was okay to lay their hands on women on multiple occasions, but they regularly threaten to shoot, run over, and even hang those who don't support them. And to be clear, threats against safety are not one-sided. There are plenty of people who come down speaking of doing harm to the old men, waving their evil flags. Please stop the city-sponsored celebration of white supremacy before someone else gets hurt. In the interest of public safety, please utilize the passive park classification and make this highly trafficked area a protest-free zone.
Thank you very much.
If something happens to me, I promise I will haunt you.
Marcus McDonald, if you're on the line, if you could press *6, Marcus McDonald.
Hello, Mayor and members of City Council. My name is Marcus McDonald. I'm speaking on two issues today. First, I do want to reach out and thank Councilmember Saccharin for the signage that was placed in front of the recovery room. We lost one of our really good friends, Hannah Carpenter. May her soul rest in peace. So again, it shouldn't take tragedies like this for, signage and things that, that community's been asking for a long time to happen, but we're glad that signage is in place. The other issue I want to discuss, and it's something that I wasn't able to speak on last month, but however, the egregious attacks by Harry Griffin on a sitting county council member were disgusting, especially for Black History Month, and especially for someone who, during his March with the Proud Boys, tried to akin his march with MLK's March on Washington. Councilmember Harry Griffin, you are nothing like MLK. MLK would have voted or would have signed my petition for your immediate resignation, because if you've known history, if you read history at any length, you know that Martin Luther King was killed by white supremacists out of the same strain of white supremacists who you march with, and the Greta and Rita march in front of today at the Battery. They're of the same strain. They have the same ideals. And for you to not only have accepted to go with them, but also saying that you agreed with everything you said, you're complicit in what they stand for. And you're also complicit in the murders of MLK, what they stood for. So please, as you continue to campaign and do a lot of feel-good stuff, do not speak on MLK's name, because you do not represent his ideals, and you're the immediate opposite of what he believed in. And for the city council, I do want to say this to the city council. If you have to make a whole code of conduct for somebody's misconduct, I believe you realize that there's a problem there, and our petition is still up if you'd like to sign. Thank you, Councilmember Saccharin, and the other council members who signed it. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
And then we did receive a few comments. One person said they opposed the Confederate flaggers who meet at White Point Garden and found it offensive that the city was approving permits for the group. One person was concerned by the amount of garbage that filled the entryway near the Charleston Arts Center on Market Street. One person would like City Council to vote no to the extension of the mask ordinance in the city. One person said the hate resolution needed to be amended and asked that Councilmember Griffin resign. One person, I believe this was Tony Daniel, who already spoke earlier, said that EMS was blocked from reaching his home during an emergency and asked council to open Frampton Street, Fairway Drive, and Harborview Road. And those are all the comments that we received.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Appreciate that. And I want to thank everybody who participated and shared your views with us this evening. So next up is our petitions and communications. And first is reappointments and couple of new appointments. These wonderful women who serve on our Commission on Women.
Second.
We have a motion to approve. Councilmember Griffin, and then I'd
Yes,
like
sir.
to.
I'm just wondering, we talk about how important women are, and we at one time didn't know that we had 4 women on council at one time. That's amazing. I'm just wondering, we've got 2 wonderful leaders on our city council here. Why aren't both of them able to serve on the Commission for Women? I know Councilmember Jackson's had that opportunity for the last couple of years, but Councilmember Del Chapo is one heck of a leader as well. And I know that the commission would love to have her insight as well. I see her on there.
Consider that nomination. Tonight, though, we have these ladies that are listed for your consideration. Any other comments or questions? All in favor, please say aye.
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 The ayes have it. I would like to recognize Janet Robinson Alterman, who's been serving as chair of the Commission on Women. Thank you for your service, and please share any remarks that you would like at this time. You're on mute, though. No,
You're on mute.
You're still on mute. Most common expression in the English language today, I'm told.
Unmute. There we are.
There we are.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for reappointing me. And I'd first like to welcome our new commission members, Ms. Moore and Ms. Gadsden. Mr. Griffin, we do have a process that when we have a vacancy, people are encouraged to apply for those vacancies. Today, I'm really here to share with you some of the things we've been able to do together. And I mean that, the commission and city council. And as you probably know, we're the only municipal commission in South Carolina. The state has a commission on women, but it has not been active for over a decade. Now, if you remember, our first official act together was when we brought a resolution to you to support the UN Commission to eliminate discrimination against women, which you unanimously adopted. And the second resolution that we brought to your attention was to support the efforts to ratify the ERA in the South Carolina legislature. Again, you stepped up to the plate and you unanimously supported that resolution. A lot of the discussions we've been having over the last several years is getting to know really the services that city government provides, and also looking at city personnel policies. As I'm sure you're aware, there's been a lot of discussion, particularly during COVID, to look at increasing benefits for employees. And in the case of the city, the cost of turnover can be very, very high. And so one of the things we brought you fairly early on was to allow a benefit, which was short-term disability insurance, which could be used for maternity leave or a long-term illness. And thanks to Kay Cross and her amazing staff, they were able to work that out so that now all city employees are covered by short-term disability. And then, of course, just a year ago, last month, we brought to you a recommendation for an extensive, comprehensive paid family leave program, which you were enthusiastic about and asked us to come back in July with the Department of Human Resources with a plan to do that. And of course, as everyone knows, due to the budget restrictions that have kicked in because of COVID, the policy was adopted, but remains unfunded for this current year. And we hope that in 2022, we'll be able to see that paid family leave funded on a staggered basis, which means that it would be completely in place by the end of 2024. The thing we're doing right now that I think is particularly exciting, and I hope you will agree with me, we're working very closely with Wendy Stever, the Director of Research and Procedural Justice with the Charleston Police Department, to explore a collaborative structure in support of broadening the prevention and intervention services involving the Charleston Police Department in response to mental health, domestic violence, and other issues of that nature. We are hoping, and we are serving as an advisory and networking group to better connect the Charleston Police Department goals and strategies to other organizations and programs to enhance the city's crisis response best practices, excuse me, in support of women and their families. That's a very brief summary. You have the complete report in your council agenda packets. I would like to also thank Council Member Gregory for the beautiful invocation, and I would like to wish your mother a happy birthday.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Y'all have done some remarkable work. We are honored to have the only active women's commission in South Carolina, and y'all are really making a difference. Thank you for again for your work. Keep it up.
Well, thank you for your support.
Absolutely.
And Mr. Mayor, I think Councilmember Waring had his hand up earlier.
Okay. I'm sorry, I missed that. Councilmember Waring?
No, sir, I had a question, but I can ask it outside the meeting, no problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to be heard? So thank you very much. We'll move forward. We have one new appointment to the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, Mr. Jeff Adkins.
Move for approval.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those the ayes have it. Oh, I guess I jumped the gun on the report. That was third on the agenda. Thank you, Madam Chair. So next is our stormwater management project highlight. We had resolved to come back to you from time to time, and rather than having the long, lengthy report with a little snippet on each of the many projects, that we get a little more focus on one project at a time. So Matt Fountain, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is a, let me share my screen. This one will be an update on the Spring Fishburne project, which we typically refer to as the Spring Fishburne project, but its formal name is the US 17 Septima P. Clark Drainage Improvement Project. So hopefully you're seeing the presentation at this point. We show our partners on the bottom left. Davison Floyd, Black and Veatch are obviously our professional services team on the project. Well, Conti Enterprises, JD, Crowder, and OL Thompson have been our contractors on the different phases of the project to date. So just briefly, the project origin. This relates to the flooding in the Spring Basin and the Fishburne Basin of the 1984 study primarily, hence the reference to the Spring Fishburne project. This includes the US 17 corridor, which obviously the flooding significantly impacts the function of that corridor. That provides one of the main routes to medical district access in the peninsula. Obviously serves to connect, hence it's the name of Crosstown, right? Serves to connect West Ashley, Mount Pleasant, downtown, North Charleston to I-26. Serves as a hurricane evacuation route. We see over 63,000 vehicles per day traveling on that 17 corridor. And it experiences over 250 accidents per year, many of which are rear end collisions due to flood impacts and related events. Another part of this project that doesn't get talked about a lot was in the early phases of the project, which is the Reconnection of Communities. That was actually the foundation of the Tiger grant that was awarded to the project and some of the DOT involvement. Obviously, when US 17 was built and expanded through the peninsula, it separated existing communities and really caused a lot of harm to the area. So there was also we don't think about it as much on this project because we talk about flooding so much from the stormwater department, but there was also a conscious effort to kind of reknit those communities through multimodal transportation, providing safe pedestrian access, bike access, and mass transit access between those different neighborhoods. So the overview, the impact area, we would call it, is about 500 acres. The diagram on the right, the upper right, the yellow boundary is sort of an impact area. It's not the exact drainage basin for the project. It's areas, there's you can see like some of West Edge is included, and there's a function of that interacts with the project. But it's areas that receive benefit or receive improvement in their situation due to the project with a slightly tighter corridor within the exact drainage basin. This is a five-phase approach project. There's 5 primary phases. And we'll talk, Earhart has sort of been added on. We'll talk about that at the very end. As very recently, as a medical district tunnel extension, it was actually part of the original thought of the project when it was first conceptualized, but was taken out due to constructability issues, and has been added back in with support from the medical district recently. Funding on this project, not counting the Earhart sections, is approximately $197 million through a combination of state infrastructure bank funding, the federal Tiger grant, SCAD contributions, and city contributions. And I think it's worth noting because I know it's I know what I mean typically when I'm talking about this project, but I think it's always worth kind of resetting expectations. It's a confusing project. It's different than a lot of the other drainage work we see in the peninsula outside of the Calhoun East project. It's a deep tunnel component project. So kind of what does that mean is shown in this diagram at the bottom of the page. And basically what you see are surface level improvements. We'll go through some slides showing those, but you see these surface level improvements, trees, landscaping, but also new surface drainage collection systems, these shallow pipes that basically bring the water to these vertical drop shafts. We call them with vortex structures at the top. Those vertical drop shafts basically let the water go down into a deep tunnel system that's dug beneath the peninsula. Those tunnels then flow down to the outfall, which is what you see going on construction-wise between the 17 bridges to West Ashley right now. And then they will flow out through a combination of gravity flow at lower tide events, especially. And then as the pump station is constructed, obviously be pumped out at all tide situations. So the purpose for that, of course, is that Charleston's very flat. So when you're trying to convey water from the center of the peninsula out to the edges of the peninsula, you really can't get the water to move very efficiently. So instead we take it down into this deep tunnel system and use a pump to be able to basically push the water out or pull the water out. So phase 1 was completed in 2013. This was focused on the neighborhood reconnection portion of the project, included an intelligent transportation system installation, basically putting in traffic control. I'll pull the pictures for that one, putting in traffic lights, pedestrian access. It also included the first parts of the surface drainage system installation. Over a mile of pipe was installed, 175 structures for stormwater, upgrading the water and sewer infrastructure through the corridor. And then you can see in the pictures kind of from the top right to the bottom right, the streetscaping component that we're familiar with today is how the road corridor looks. Phase 2, this is 2017 completion. This is the rest of the surface drainage installation going in. Another 2 miles, a little bit more than 2 miles of pipe installed, almost 2 miles of pipe cleaned, 300 more stormwater structures installed, more streetscaping, and then the first portion of the deep tunnel component, the 8 vertical drop shafts and vortex boxes were installed to basically be able to bring that water from the surface down to what will be the deep tunnels, which is phase 3 of the project. This was completed last year. Deep tunnel work. There are 4 equipment access shafts. That was the, we talked about this a lot. There was the closure at the King Street off ramp from the US 17 was actually where we were installing one of those. You see one on Harmon Field. If you go out to Harmon Field, it's now been primarily restored, as well as 2 other locations. This is where we lowered like tunnel boring machine and equipment down into the tunnels to be able to actually dig out and create this tunnel approach. We did install 8,200 feet of 8-foot diameter and 12-foot diameter tunnels. So these are really large tunnels. Think 2 people standing on top of each other in the primary tunnels. And another 800 feet of 6-foot diameter tunnels, which would be called adits in mining parlance, basically smaller tunnels that serve into those drop shafts and connect a larger drainage basin into the major project. We also performed environmental mitigation as part of our phase 3 work for disturbance we'd be doing in phase 4. Phase 4 is our current project phase. So what you see between the bridges heading out towards West Ashley. We'll be installing 3 8-foot by 10-foot box culverts. So you can imagine how big that set of piping is going out into the marsh. In fact, you don't have to imagine it because you can actually see it in the existing excavation pathway out there. We'll also be putting in the pump station wet well. It's basically a really large concrete box that holds a lot of water to allow the pumps to cycle enough for the pumps to cool down between start and stop cycles, so that they can work in a variety of different sized rainstorms. And this phase, also interestingly, the completion of phase 4 before the pumps go in, we'll still see in general about a 500% increase in the amount of water we're able to convey out of the corridor, even before the pumps go in, just from that gravity flow. And that does vary depending on tide. In a king tide, we'll see more like 200% increase. In a low tide, we might see more like 600 or 700% increase. So it's still a substantial improvement. Just to run through a little bit of the construction, I don't want to take too much time, but it's a pretty interesting project. So this is what we looked like when we started phase 4. Phase 3 basically that's the access shaft there sitting between the bridges where we lower equipment down into the deep tunnels. First step was kind of installing this trestle out into the marsh. It is not the first component of the West Ashley bike bridge project, which is my most commonly asked question from friends and family members, if that's what I'm building here. But it is about 1 million pounds of steel supporting the cranes that go in to install the project work here. You can see the coffer dams. These are actually very tall metal sheets, which we'll see in a second, installed down to protect the excavation work, where we'll be building the next phases of the project. So here you can see the excavation progressing. There's a little bit of vertical distortion as well here with the camera shot, but you can see the struts and bracing going in, the piles have been installed. We're actually starting forming for concrete at this point in the project. And then we've now started our mass pour concrete work and basically are filling back in this large excavation, all of the piling we put in with a concrete shell. It'll be starting soon on the actual construction of the cast in place outfall culverts as well. So the next phase will be phase 5. This is expected to complete very late 2023, early 2024. This is the pump station component of the project. Obviously, here is a architect's rendering of what the pump station will look like, rather than an in-construction photo as the rest of them were. We have not built it since last week. This is where we'll be housing 3 120,000 gallon per minute pumps. That will provide an over 1,000% increase in what we see in today's flow. So that will take us to a major design scale storm event with functionality even in high tide conditions. Medical district, the tunnel extension, the Earhart project, this has been added in as well, or added back into the project. We'd also expect this to complete in 2024. This one is design and permit ready. We're just finalizing easements, which we had at council tonight with MUSC. And then we'll be accepting the recently announced award of the HUD CDBG MIT funding of $10 million from the federal source through the state. And that will help, that will basically allow us to provide drainage in the 27 acres of the Earhart Basin, which is basin 2 in this upper right corner. It's sort of the easternmost basin there on the medical district side. The bottom picture kind of shows the flooding in a 1-year storm event that basin experiences. So it's a very flood prone area. It's the service route for many of the emergency rooms in the area. So it's kind of a nice critical corridor to be able to meet with this project with a very quick implementation date. So I do want to note our website, and I'm actually going to stop sharing this and jump to the website very quickly, because I tried to give you a quick presentation. We actually have a really nice updated website that we put together for Spring Fishburne in case you were trying to remember everything I said without my presentation to run through. So this is the site. If you go to www.springfishburnedrainage.com, you'll actually see this come up as a animation that kind of shows some traffic moving and things. But really, as you jump down here, this is where the core of the project is. This shows the project area on the right is a map with basically a rendering of what the project will look like. And this is kind of showing all phases, and it kind of has a description of what we're talking about here. But you can actually nicely go through the phases and see what happened in phase 1. And phase 1 was from 2009 to 2012 and installed streetscaping, and it kind of gives you a nice little summary and shows location wise where that was on the map. You can kind of work your way through the phases and see how the drop shafts go in, where those locations are. You can go in and see where the tunnels come in the blue lines. These are the deep tunnel routes on the project. Obviously the wet well now being constructed out between the bridges, and then with phase 5 building in the pump station on top of it. And then as you scroll down, you can kind of see some interesting facts about the project. Lots of just kind of interesting information, how much pump volume we remove, and get down into images. And this is regularly updated. You can also sign up at the top to stay connected to the project and get email updates about progress on the project if you're interested. So this is kind of where we're moving to as a department for project updates and website information, trying to provide more story maps, more information, easier to understand documents that are a little more useful for the general public. So I appreciate your time, and if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to address this.
Very good.
You muted, Mayor.
Sorry, Councilmember Shade and then Saccharin.
Thank you. Matt, would you mind going back to, I think it was one of the very early illustrations that showed the tunnel heading to the pump station?
In the PowerPoint presentation, Councilman?
Yes, sir. Or even on the website, it was one of the earlier points that you had in there. It showed the illustration of the pipe, the tunnel going towards the shaft right there. That one right there.
Sorry, yeah, I'm just pushing too many buttons. It's my fault. I'm pushing too many buttons on my end. Yeah, I'm going back. There we go.
All right, this one. So I noticed that the tunnel is lower than the pump station, and we had a lot of discussion about pre-pump station, this water flowing out.
Mm-hmm.
So the water level is lower here, and then the pump station is higher up. How is that water exiting out of this tunnel before the pump is functional?
Yeah, so again, in engineering terms, we'd call this like a hydraulic grade line or a head pressure situation, but you're right. So what happens is the water pressure is not from tunnel. The tunnel is at depth because we're trying to stay out of the way of building foundations and be deep enough down in the marl that we're not impacting anyone's ability to pile foundation, their buildings, or have basically other impacts like that. But what happens is these vertical drop shafts, those will fill with water up to a level, and you can kind of see it in this picture, where that level as you track across is actually equal to the level in the pump station and then into the outfall. So the pressure, the water pressure, the column of water pressure is equal to the height of the water in kind of the highest place, right? Water will push its way flat. So the water in the tunnel will not drain out on its own, obviously, without pumps kicking on, but the water on the surface is at a higher level than the outfall. So it will push, basically, the water pressure pushes that water down through the tunnel and out. So it works.
It's like a flushing system.
Kind of, it's like if you had a hose, right, and you hold up two ends of the hose and it makes a U at the bottom, and you lift up one side of the hose, the water will come pouring out of the other side of the hose, because water will always seek a flat level.
See, Matt, you've learned to explain things to me in simplistic terms.
It's a really, this is one of the most complicated things to describe is this idea of hydraulic grade line of facing. How does the weight of water move water around?
Right. Well, it's fascinating because I think people were concerned that as we were proving the financing for this, and we knew there's going to be a ways down the road before the pump stations were installed and functional, but we were getting the benefit of the tunnel system in alleviating the flooding. And I think that's shown already. I mean, we've seen some of this benefit already. But it was just interesting to me, the different levels of the pump station versus the tunnel. So your explanation is helpful. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, at the end of phase 4, we should see some significant improvements to drainage in the corridor.
Terrific. Councilmember Saccharin.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt, I just wanted to say that the website is awesome. I think it's something that I think all of our departments should think about. It's very easy to see, and I can just tell that it's really well laid out. So thanks for doing that. And the second question, which I get a lot about this project, is if you could describe in kind of like broad terms, what parts of the peninsula are going to benefit from this. I get questions like, up in Hampton Park Terrace and Wagner Terrace, but are folks going to see any tangible benefit in that neck of the woods?
Yeah, absolutely. So that one, the website is great for that. I'm going to jump back really quick to the website, because on the website you can see the drop shaft locations that come in. So those are going to be your major kind of your major impact points. That's where we tie the surface drainage in. So you're going to see the most impact kind of running north-south here on President Street. This is the President Street tunnel up to Fishburne. Then you're going to see major impact along the 17 corridor. We're also tying in all the surface drainage. So you'll see improvement through this whole orange-coated area here. And this is Hampton Park here. So basically coming all the way up Hampton Park here, all the way over to, so this is where 17 and 26 come in. King Street is basically this section here. So you're going to see pretty significant improvement all along the corridor from King Street, almost as high as Hampton Park here, over and down. The area that doesn't show on this map is some of the west edge, because it's not directly served by the project. It's an interesting combination there with what the west edge drainage improvements are doing and what the tunnel improvements are doing. So you'll see improvement in this whole area. It's just a component of two different projects working together drainage wise. And then you'll see some southern additions here as you come down President, basically to the bottom side of Sutton Clark, and some of the worst flooded areas basically are kind of this core corridor here, which is why you see so many drainage inlets. And then we have extended down with Earhart to go actually below B Street here a little bit into the Earhart Basin as well, which is not shown on this one, obviously, as it wasn't part of the original project layout. So is that helpful, Councilman? It's a big area, so it's sometimes hard to describe very quickly, but it's a pretty substantial drainage basin.
Thank you.
And that map doesn't indicate the little area that'll be added when West Edge does their connection to the shaft.
Correct.
And also to the hospital district. But it seems to me the biggest benefit to our citizens everywhere, if you think about 63,000 cars a day that traverse the Septima Clark Parkway, just the mobility factor for everybody to get around will be a huge benefit.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Mayor. I think the traffic impacts along Septima Clark will be incredibly important. And then, I mean, honestly, the President Street corridor is one of those corridors that we constantly have to tell people we can't do much for you from a flooding perspective because you're in a bowl. I mean, that's all way. That's many of these kind of little side streets that come off here are some of the worst impacted flooding areas in the city. So these are areas that we'll see an immediate relief on that project, which and B Street kind of falls into that. We won't serve all of it, but we'll serve a good chunk of it as well.
All right, any more questions or comments for Mr. Fountain? Councilmember Waring?
I just want to point out the talent and skill sets that our Stormwater Department team has. I mean, this is a project that will span the better part of a decade. And I mean, this is so interesting. We can do like Disney and live stream this thing. But anyway, after a while, we'll charge admission to be a member of the Public Works Committee.
Thank you. Councilmember Del Chapo?
I just wanted to continue Jason's first point, which was like little marketer tear comes to my eye at the beauty of this website. And this is exactly what we want, what our citizens want. It's easy, it's simple, everybody knows what's going on, it's updated in real time. And I cannot encourage more of this across departments throughout the city to happen. I think it makes everyone's lives easier. Most importantly, it makes those people we represent, it makes their lives easier to know what's going on and to get a lot of their questions answered instead of not knowing who to call and what to do, and they just get frustrated. So whoever put this together, like, I tip my hat to you. It's amazing. Let's work on more of this style of communication.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments? Back to Councilmember Shade.
Just a quick comment, Mayor. We had a tour of this tunnel about maybe 2 years or so ago. So Matt, is that available for us as a group to go down into this existing work? Is that feasible?
So, Councilman, we can certainly take you to the outfall that's currently being constructed, wet well in the outfall. Going down into the tunnels, we don't have any contractors working in the tunnels at this point. It's a pretty substantial lift. They have to bring in kind of cranes and ventilation systems and safety crews to get into the tunnels. But the wet well outfall is certainly something that's worth going to take a look at. Yes, that's a great idea. We can certainly take you out there and show you around. You may or may not want to climb down into the concrete work. I think it's like 60 feet of ladder climbing at this point in time to get down into the system, but we can certainly do a top-down view for the project.
I'll follow Councilmember Mitchell and do that. But it is those of us who had the opportunity to go into the tunnels, and if we have an opportunity to go into this pump station construction area, gives you a feel of the magnificence of this project. And as Councilmember Waring was alluding to, the talent and the sheer engineering feat that this is accomplishing. And so if that could be arranged as a group opportunity for council, I would encourage you to set that up for us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very hard to get a good grasp of the scale of project from the pictures. It is, it's very large. I mean, that hole in the ground that the wet well is about 45,000 tons of material that was removed to create that. So I think you're right. It's very helpful to see it in person.
It was so successful when the mayor took the governor down. We came out, he went down with no money and came back up with a pocket full of money, I think. Right, Mr. Mayor?
I still am so thankful to Governor McMaster for coming through on his commitment to help us with this project. I mentioned that a couple of weeks ago when we first announced it, but he really followed this all the way through. It didn't work out with his regular general fund budget last year because of COVID, but he didn't forget, and he brought it back as with approval of our grant application to the mitigation funds that he had available. So thank you, Governor McMaster. one more time. All right. So let's move on. Thank you, Matt, for that presentation. Excellent. Our update on the city's response to COVID-19. Shannon Scaff and his incident team have been doing a great job in helping, despite the lack of doses out there, of doing everything we can to facilitate vaccinations and vaccination locations. And Tracy has some news for us also about our latest statistics.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everybody. Brief update for you tonight. So after being able to report, steady decline in cases over the past couple of months, we are unfortunately beginning to see an increase in the trend in new cases. So although our total numbers still are moderately low, the recent uptick in cases has put two of our indicators kind of in that red zone. And additionally, the number of new cases per 1,000 residents, you can see, is approaching that yellow zone. And that indicator is what we believe to be manageable by our medical community for hospitalizations as well as contact tracing. So that's something that we want to really keep a close eye on. And looking at hospitalizations, because that really is an important factor to consider, you can see that the hospitalizations for COVID-19 patients has been stable. So we haven't seen an uptick in that, but we do know that has a slight delay. So this is definitely something we want to keep our eye on over the coming weeks. Vaccine distribution. You can see that we're getting some increases in Pfizer, moderate increases kind of week by week. Moderna is kind of holding at the same level. And then we're starting to see just trickles of the Janssen or the J&J actually coming into this state. I think we saw about 120,000 doses come into the state this week. You all probably saw that we've actually reached over 1 million South Carolinians in the state have started the vaccine process. And we actually have 1.7 million doses have been administered in the state as well. So the progress is slow, but it continues. So we're now up to 21% of the population of South Carolina that has at least started the process. And I believe Charleston County, we're somewhere closer to 25%. So that's very, very encouraging. I know that y'all are interested in the demographics. So just a little tidbit about that. We are seeing an increase in the percentage of Black citizens taking the vaccine. So that's slowly increasing, which is really great to see. As far as Hispanic and Latinos, that's still very lagging. It's only 1.6% of that population that is getting vaccinated, compared to 6% of the population in the state is actually Hispanic or Latino. So, so that's something that is an area of concern, if you will. And the gender gap is actually starting to close, though, on vaccination. So there's some good things happening, but we still have a little ways to go. I thought you guys would be interested in knowing about a survey that was done by DHEC. So they did a receptivity survey kind of at the end of January, early February. They surveyed over 30,000 South Carolinians, had a good representation of citizens from all of the regions of the state. However, it is important to note that in the survey, citizens that are 18 to 30, racial minorities, and men were actually pretty underrepresented in the survey. But I thought you guys might find just a snapshot of some of the charts, of one of the charts that they have in their report of interest. So the good thing is that over 80% actually felt like they were going to get the vaccine once they were eligible. So that's really, really encouraging. I think the place that has some opportunity from their report is, you can see that second question is, I'm confident that the COVID-19 vaccine is safe. And so less than 30% strongly agreed with that. And so I think that there's some work to do there to really let people know and to educate people that the vaccine is safe so that people are comfortable taking that vaccine. And that's all I really have for you tonight. I want to turn it over to Shannon to talk about the great work that he and his team are doing around vaccinations, but I'm happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Thank you, Tracy. Shannon?
Thanks, Tracy. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. A lot of work being done for vaccinations. We're definitely pushing them through the city here. You'll recall we had teamed up with Harris Teeter and the Gaillard Center. Harris Teeter's administered second doses at the Gaillard Center last week. The event was a success. All vaccines on hand were administered. And between Pfizer and Moderna, over 3,500 vaccines were administered out of that effort. MUSC opened up the location where the old DMV was at 180 Lockwood on March 15th. The hours of operation for that, Monday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And those hours of operation will fluctuate with vaccine availability. Right now, as I understand it, there is availability, and they've opened that up to the public in terms of being able to make appointments. Federal Healthcare will be operating a vaccine clinic out of the Arthur Christopher Community Center beginning tomorrow from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Johnson & Johnson vaccines will be administered there. No appointments will be scheduled for those. Federal Healthcare's vaccine models, first come, first serve for that. Vaccines will be administered for 5 hours tomorrow. Better said they have enough vaccines to administer during that entire 5-hour period, and they'll go as long as time allows for them to. This week, emergency management contacted 10 congregations within the city of Charleston with large parking areas about the potential for hosting vaccination sites. I had a conversation with one of my DHEC leads in the area this weekend on Sunday, and working with him directly to connect providers to area clergy. So that's kind of our next effort now that we've got 180 Lockwood up and running, and they're doing very well. Several hundred a day, as I understand it, are being administered. So we're definitely pushing vaccines throughout the city, which is great news. Happy to take your questions.
Councilmember Shealy and then Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Shannon or Tracy, I don't know if y'all would even know the answer to this question, but I know MUSC did trials on both Jensen and AstraZeneca. Do we know how many people may be vaccinated from that? I'm assuming that's not in these numbers of vaccinated, but do we have any idea how many people were vaccinated through the trials?
Tracy, any idea?
I used to know the number that were in the first trial, but I'm not sure what it is. So I hate to give that number when I'm not positive.
Okay, well, thank you.
Sorry.
Councilmember Griffin.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to, I don't say this enough, but thank you, Shannon and Tracy, for all you do. Putting this data out, and the fact that we as a city have opened up all of our resources to get people vaccinated. That's really great. And last but not least, Shannon, congratulations on becoming a grandfather.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Terrific. Councilmember Shea.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and Shannon and Tracy, I just want to let you know that I got my vaccination. My second shot was last Thursday at the Gaillard, and the level of efficiency and level of care too. I mean, the folks were not just running us in and out as cattle. They were very patient with the folks who were there. They were very compassionate with the folks who were there. And it was just a smooth operation and a pleasant experience. So all those who were involved in the management of that and the organization that needs, I tip your hat for the work that y'all did with all of that. So thank you. I had a small little reaction to the second shot. It was just more of an upset stomach than anything else, but felt great. And I hope we can continue that kind of work. I did hear there was some concern with the municipal court kicking back into gear and maybe some parking issues or traffic issues being at the old DMV. Have y'all addressed that yet? Have y'all heard some issues about the DMV location?
Yes, sir. We did have some initial concerns with it. I believe that's been worked through now. You know, it's a day-to-day thing, and some of that's weather dependent as well. But it's sort of a moving target. But our logistics folks, Chelsea Taylor out of the police department, has done a phenomenal job using some of our resources organically within the city to help make that happen. I feel like we're in a good place with that, sir. And appreciate your comment about that. You know, a shout out to the Rotary Club for their help with it. Obviously, Gaillard Center and the management staff there has done a phenomenal job. Mr. Mike Tito and Daniel Flessis in emergency management did a lot of work with that. And obviously the Harris Teeter folks who came in from Raleigh, North Carolina to help did a phenomenal job, and glad we got you in there.
Yep.
Councilmember Mitchell.
Man, Councilmember, I had my second injection also at the Gaillard and didn't have no problem. Didn't have any symptoms, nothing. Because when I spoke with them, they said, Mr. Mitchell, take any I said, I'm not on any medication. I don't take medication at all. I have never been on any medication. And so he said, well, you might be all right. So I didn't have any reaction, nothing at all. My sister them had some, but I didn't have no reaction. So I was good all the time. I just had a sore arm a little bit, but nothing else. Everything was fine.
Awesome. So I had my second shot as well Friday. I'm a member of the herd immunity. I do want to share that even though something like 1 million doses have now been distributed in South Carolina, there are millions more that will need to be distributed. The doses are just really coming forward now and will be over the next couple of months. So we can still see the clearing ahead, but we're not all clear yet. As Tracy reported, some of our case numbers locally are creeping back up. And so, y'all, we got to stick with this for a little bit longer and keep preaching the message, asking everybody when they can to get vaccinated. And as you've heard, we're doing everything we can, staff and working with our healthcare partners to make sure that availability is there. Thank you for that, Shannon and team, and Tracy as well. All right, so next we do have a renewal of one emergency ordinance. It's been mentioned earlier this evening. Susan, you want to explain that to us, or Chip?
I can, Mayor.
Yep, that'd be great.
Okay. And Chip, you jump in if I describe it inaccurately, but this is an extension of an emergency ordinance that that council previously passed. It's part of a recovery effort in the city, creates a special parking district, which allows the suspension of off-street parking requirements. We understand it's working well, and we're requesting that it be extended for an additional 60 days, would expire on May 23rd. Chip, feel free to add anything at this point.
I just wanted to mention that I tried to track the language of the outdoor dining ordinances that I prepared. The idea, I'm trying to sort of avoid any issues, related to emergency ordinances dealing with COVID directly. This is more of a recovery. It's an emergency ordinance to help economic recovery, not something to deal directly with COVID. So for those of you who are concerned, I don't think it's inconsistent if you disagree with extending emergency ordinances related directly to COVID to agree with an emergency ordinance related to economic recovery from COVID, if you would like to take that position. But that I've tried to draft it in that.
Terrific. So any questions or discussion? Can we entertain a motion to approve? Councilmember Appel.
Second.
Motion on the floor, Councilmember Appel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just want to thank everybody who had a hand in this. Again,
Councilmember Del Chapo, Councilmember Seekings, the Central Business District, the historic groups, Low Country Local First, Charleston Moves. I'm probably missing out on others, but this was a real good collaborative effort and it's working well. And I got to give a shout out. The city of Charleston was featured in a national publication, Wired Magazine. They highlighted this ordinance as an example of a city leading the way on innovative mobility related regulations coming out of COVID. And I'm so excited to hear that it's already caused, I believe, 3 businesses to get permitted. Those are going to be 3 vacancies that we've turned around. And I think with another 60 days, as the COVID recovery and vaccinations come out, who knows what we can get from this. But I do think that moving forward, we need to keep our eye on making this permanent and also responsibly extending the geographical boundaries of this on the city. And we're going to do that in a deliberative way. We're going to talk to all the council people whose districts are implicated, the neighborhood groups, but this is a great test program. It's worked. The sky is not falling. Cats are not sleeping with dogs. It's okay. We can let businesses open without this red tape, and we can allow Charleston to really be well poised for a very strong economic recovery coming out of COVID, because people are coming here, they're leaving up north, they're leaving out west. Let's let them bring their businesses with them, and let's put this city on rocket fuel. Thanks.
Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really appreciate the differential that Mr. McQueenie was able to educate us about. I do feel like this ordinance deserves to stand on its own as a rescue for an economic deficiency emergency. But I also support my colleague, Councilmember Appel, who basically, began the drumbeat that I now think is very strong for why we should be making a district like this permanent on our zoning code books. I know y'all are tired of me talking about where I came from, but my little community in Northern Virginia suffered the same types of growing pains between 2 large expanding metro area counties of Northern Virginia. And they tried their hardest to make parking as onerous as possible and basically dried up their own business district in the process. So it really is, maybe it's counterintuitive, but it definitely is not the onerous burden to residential neighborhoods that are literally on the backside of a commercial block. I've seen it work, and I've seen it, well, of course, we don't want a lot of extra parking burden on our commercial district that everybody loves to walk to and be part of. So I think that's the prize that we should keep our eyes on, and anything that I can do to bring that kind of thinking to Folly Road, I would love to see that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. You opposed? Guys have it. So next up is our discussion regarding federal stimulus and relief and its relation to the city budget. And Councilmember Griffin, thank you for bringing this forward. It just passed, I think, at the time of our last meeting. And I assure you, at the right time and after our presentation tonight, if council decides to take some action on this matter, it's certainly fine. I certainly felt like it was a work in progress, that we didn't have all the information, and we'll get a report for you right now from Amy Wharton and Susan Herdina about what we know about the stimulus package and what's allowed and what's not. It's kind of like a grant. So some expenses are allowed and some aren't. So I want to, though, assure you, Councilmember Griffin, on my part, that, and I was one of the council members who voted in favor of this year's challenging budget. I think it was communicated by most of the council members who voted in favor of this year's budget, that if we have the opportunity to defray those 2 mills that were a part of this year's budget, that we would utilize any available funding to defray those 2 mills. And that's still our intention. I just feel like we need to make sure that it's an allowable expense by the federal law. So with that being said, I'd like to call Amy to give us an update on what we know about the stimulus bill and the facts thereof. Amy?
Mr. Mayor, I'm gonna say a point of order on this one. As I understood Councilman Griffin, he didn't ask for a discussion. He asked for a motion to be put on the floor. Now, one thing you said in the last meeting, which I think we all agree with, I know I do, is that we were gonna have meetings with the Budget Ad Hoc Committee, which I would hope we would get once all the information comes in from the feds. We could have all that roll up your sleeve. We have to go back to work to see how all of this works. As I understand, all that information isn't in from the feds yet. And just from the sake of time, we're already almost 3 hours into this meeting and still have a executive session to go. Could we dispense maybe that presentation until the ad hoc committee has a chance to really vet this thing out? I mean, you made mention about the ad hoc committee needing to work on this last meeting, and I think you're 100% right on that. As I said, I agree with that. But instead of going through discussions tonight, having the ad hoc committee meetings, vetting out the facts of this, and then obviously bringing it back to council again, I would hope that we could defray the discussion and kind of move through this meeting tonight, because I know the ad hoc committee, we all know you, that was a good process. You and I think Councilman Cheyenne came up with the ad hoc budget committee years ago, and it's proven to be very effective. And I look forward to getting to work on that with this stimulus piece. But to have a discussion, and we know we're going to have further discussions, I would hope that we could defer that discussion for the ad hoc committee meeting and maybe get through this meeting tonight.
Well, I will say in a nutshell that we are waiting federal guidance from the Treasury Department on the details of what's allowable under this bill. There's questions about it. Our own Attorney General, Wilson, has questioned what's allowable, as have other Attorney Generals around the country. So we feel like we must resolve those issues, and Amy and Susan are prepared to explain all of that in detail and what we know now and what we're kind of waiting to figure out. So Councilmember Griffin, this was requested by you. So I'll put it back to you, council member, if you'd like to proceed with this information. We can vote on something tonight, but and maybe it's fine to present it after you make a motion. But we're prepared to share everything we know. Council member.
Did you call me, sir?
Yes, sir. Would you like?
Yes, sir. Yeah. The fact of the matter is, when a council member asks for something to be put on the agenda to be voted on, theoretically, and in actuality, it could be put on the agenda for a vote. You know, I mean, that's parliamentary procedure and Robert's Rules of Order. I asked for something to be put on there. It could have been put on there just as I asked it to be put on there, but it wasn't. And I don't know who made that decision. Maybe it was you, sir. Maybe you have a better way to do it. But I wanted it put on there for an up or down vote. I didn't ask for it to be put on for a presentation or anything like that. That's where I'm getting at with that. I can understand there needs to be a lot more discussion done with the ad hoc committee, but the fact of the matter is we said that we were going to, if we got federal funding, we didn't have a bunch of stipulations about, well, if this happens or that happens. We said if we got federal funding, that we would roll back the tax increase. I'm sure, I understand that we can't apply the federal funding to a tax increase. I understand that, but I'm certain that we could find $3.2 million in expenses and apply that federal funding to, and not have to raise taxes. I just wanted to make sure that it was the pleasure of council to still do that, because we talked about it back in December, but a lot of time has passed by. I don't think there would have been any harm to take an up or down vote to make sure that our council was still feeling that way, that they wanted to try to find that money to roll back the taxes. That's what I asked for, sir. And I hope that can be put on the agenda. There's going to be no harm to do that.
No harm whatsoever. And as I mentioned just a few moments ago, we wanted to share complete information on what we know, and then in all prudence, ask if council and you would like to make a motion, which would be fine to do tonight. We're prepared to share with you everything you know, and leave it up to y'all's good judgment if you want to make a motion and take a vote on it tonight. Councilmember Shade?
I just want to echo what Councilmember Waring was alluding to. We can't vote on something we don't have all the information on. That would be imprudent on our part. For us to address budget issues and fiscal responsibility on matters we don't have full answers on would be irresponsible. And Councilmember Waring hit the nail on the head with this early on in the discussion. I've talked to Ms. Warden, I talked to Ms. Herdina, and as you summarized, Mayor, we don't have all the answers out there yet. There are lawsuits pending, and there are rulings we're getting from the United States Treasury Department on how this money may or may not be applied. For us to make any decisions on that would not be good stewards of the public funds. So we need to wait. And Councilmember Waring said it. Let's bring it. Let's get the answers that we need to receive. I'm not wavering from my commitment on this, but I want to make sure as I'm treading through this monetary issues that we've got everything on the table and we understand what we're doing.
So full transparency, I'd like to proceed with our presentation so you know what we know. Amy, could I ask you to proceed with the presentation? Thank you.
Sure. Okay, can everybody see my screen okay?
Yep.
Hello, everybody too, sorry. So I'm starting out with important definitions because some of this is a little confusing when it comes into what we can use the money for. So they have a metropolitan city defined, which is what the city of Charleston is. And those are the definitions there. It's based on Housing and Community Development Act of 1974. And it's basically a metropolitan area, which is the central city of such an area, or a metropolitan area that has a population of 50,000 or more. A non-entitlement unit of local government is not a metropolitan city. And I'm telling you all this because I did have some phone calls today because of the article in the paper about how much the city of Charleston was receiving versus other cities around us. So I just wanted to kind of explain, because we're a metropolitan city, so our formula is different than non-entitlement cities. Anyway, sorry. The eligible worker, those are workers needed to maintain continuity of operations or essential critical infrastructure sectors, and that is determined by the chief executive officer of the metropolitan city. So the mayor could say that all city employees are eligible workers. Premium pay is an amount up to $13 per hour that is paid to an eligible worker, and that's in addition to wages or remuneration the eligible worker otherwise receives. And then tranche is a division or portion of a pool or a whole. So the allocation of payment, metropolitan cities were allocated this fund based on the formula under Housing and Community Development Act of 1974, which is the same way that we receive our CDBG funding. Non-entitlement units, because they don't have that same formula. It's based on population and some other things as to how they are within the state that they reside. And then we will get payment in two separate tranches. The first tranche should come 60 days after the date of the enactment of the bill. And then the second tranche will be not earlier than 12 months after the date of when the first tranche amount was paid. Our allocation is $20.7 million. We will get our allocation directly from the federal government. Non-entitlement cities will get it passed through the state. So that's one distinction between the two. We'll get 50% in the first tranche and then the remaining 50% in the second tranche. And we must use the funds by December 31st, 2024. And this isn't as bad as me reading the whole entire bill to you like they did in the federal government. So trying to paraphrase as much as possible. Then this is what the funds can be used for. Response to public health emergency with respect to COVID-19, including assistance to households, small businesses, and nonprofits, or aid to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. Response to workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 public health emergency by providing grants to eligible employers that have eligible workers to perform essential work, and providing premium pay to eligible workers. So that's why I had those two definitions for you at the beginning. And then also for revenue losses due to COVID-19 collected in the most recent full fiscal year. So it's limited to revenue loss due to pandemic relative to the fiscal year prior to the emergency. So based on our 2020 revenue losses, if that makes sense. And then to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure, transfer funds to private nonprofit organizations, public benefit corporations involved in the transportation of passengers or cargo, or a special purpose unit of state or local government. And then the last one is we could also transfer this money back to the state. But I had some special comments about that. Anyway. Our reporting requirements, we will be required to periodically report a detailed accounting of the uses of the funds. And if we use those funds for unallowable purposes, then we will have to pay the funds back. So it's just like any grant that we have, basically, we are going to have some reporting requirements. And then this is the property tax portion of this. So there's some confusion on the ability to use the funds for property tax purposes. The verbiage is silent for metropolitan cities, but it expressly prohibits a state or territory to use the funds to either directly or indirectly offset a reduction in the net tax revenue, or reduction in the rate, a deduction, a credit, or otherwise delay the imposition of any tax or tax increase. So this is what we were talking about, and Susan, maybe she would want to talk about this a little bit with our Attorney General and some of the lawsuits that are coming in, because the states and the non-entitled cities are not happy that metropolitan cities were also not included in that restriction. Does anybody have any questions about that for Susan?
But Amy, go back to the prior slide. There was the right-hand side. Did you cover that? No, if funds are used for an unallowable purpose, we will be required to pay the funds back. And I met with Mayor Summey on another matter yesterday, and this was his top concern as well, that if we were to spend funds on something that then was later determined to be not unallowable, that you'd literally have to cough the money back up and return it to the federal government. And we just need to be prudent and careful about that before we make any firm decisions, in my opinion. Amy?
Okay.
Ms. Wharton asked if there was a question about this property slide. Can I just ask a quick question? So
sure.
Are we saying that because, thank you. Are we saying that because the verbiage is silent for metropolitan cities that is the decision already made that we're allowed to do what the entitled states or cities are not, or whatever you're calling them? The other recipients of funds, is that an assumption already, or do we still have to research that first statement?
That's what we need to research and make sure based on the lawsuits that are being filed. Because when I was looking at this too, I'll just say this, in the Governmental Finance Officers Association, they had some guidance on this, and they mentioned that the way that they had put out the restriction, it was for everybody. It wasn't just for states and territories. So I
personally would be very concerned that we would make a wrong assumption on that before we actually know, some more official answer. So
right. So we just don't know. That's why they had filed some lawsuits and things like that because of it. And we just need to hang back and just make sure before we make those decisions, just to see what they actually meant by that. And maybe they did mean that it was okay for metropolitan cities and not for the others. I don't know. We just need to get better guidance.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Susan, did you want to add anything? I saw you.
Yeah, just to reiterate that point that, we can't say at this point whether the city can use the funds to offset a tax increase. We're waiting for some guidance from the Treasury Department. As Amy said, the ad for bids from using the funds either directly or indirectly to give tax relief. It's very, very strong language. And, but that language is not expressly in the bill restricting cities. So there's much confusion on that point right now, which is understandable. The bill just was passed. The Attorney General of Ohio has filed a lawsuit asking for an injunction, claiming that the provision restricting the state is unconstitutional. And 20 attorney generals, including, I guess it's 21 attorney generals, including Attorney General Wilson, have basically requested guidance from the Treasury Department on exactly this issue, and they are asking for an answer by today. And I think if they don't get an answer today, they're probably going to be joining the lawsuit that's already been filed. So I think we do have to be very careful here. But I also think the matter is going to be resolved hopefully soon, because the distribution is supposed to occur relatively soon of the money. I'm happy if anybody wants to see the act, the language in the act. I'm happy to send it to you. Just let me know. Also happy to send you the letter that Attorney General Wilson signed on to a few days ago. Thank you.
Councilmember Appel and then Del Chapo.
Councilmember Jackson actually covered my question, and it just sounds like this is something that's in the process of getting, worked out, and we're getting close.
Getting close. Councilmember Del Chapo.
So essentially, I'm just, let's say that money that we get, we use it toward approved uses, and it balances out your budget. As a result, you don't need to then incur a property tax increase, which that isn't due until later in the year. So I guess I'm somehow missing a link as to how A leads to B. I mean, if you're granted this money and you use it as you're allowed, couldn't you then, when you submit your millage, when do we submit it, Amy? The end of September, something around in there?
End of August.
End of August, it could reflect that, or is that what they're potentially trying to avoid here? I guess I don't understand.
Well, and that's what
I'm not understanding how like this flows together.
Well, that's why we need additional guidance. We have a balanced budget right now, Councilmember Del Chapo, and it includes the millage. So they're saying directly or indirectly, we have a balanced budget. And so if we were to use that, they could consider that supplanting. And now I'm getting into grant terms a little bit. So that's why we need to just get better clarification from them to see what their intent is. Because we have a balanced budget right now that includes the tax increase.
Right, that includes the millage increase. I guess that's just, would you run the risk of having a surplus? So that's, I guess I'm just not seeing how the dots connect so clearly. If you wind up with this money and you're able to use it, and you can then relieve your taxpayers, but
Councilmember Del Chapo, I don't know if this helps or not, but I kind of dug into the history of the bill, because I had the same question about how to connect A to B. And what I found was the indirect language is included in there by the Senate, I think primarily because they wanted to make sure that at least the states were going to use the money on programs that the bill was intended to fund, and not to be used for tax relief.
Not to be solely for the intent of relieving taxes.
Right. So, but that's, it is a question that is burning, and I think we're going to get some good direction on it hopefully soon.
Councilmember Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I have one thought for you, Councilwoman Del Chapo. I think I'm following your your logic about why.
I'm glad
the
so much.
question. I think what we need to do, and I'm sure Ms. Wharton is doing this, but once we get the actual, apples to apples comparison of what is allowed, which sounds like we are going to be able to figure that out pretty easily, then we need to match that to what have we budgeted. So if allowed expenses are actually in our budget, then I think your logic is correct that we would be able to say we're substituting new money for budgeted money, and then that will impact the overall need for raising the millage. Right. But the worst case downside, not that getting money that we can put to good use is a worst case, but in terms of trying to match our budget expenses, there might be a lot of allowable, funds that are coming to us from this 20 million that don't really replace the money that we budgeted for other purposes. So that's sort of my thought, that we need to do that cross, hatching, matching, to make sure that what we get is something that can substitute for what we know we were going to spend out of our general funds budget.
Great.
Typically with appropriations or grants, you don't use it for the items that are already budgeted for. It's for those things above and beyond. So we had a lot of budget cuts, things that we took out of the budget because we didn't have the revenue to support it. That would be more what you would use those funds for, which I have some examples if you want me to go forward.
Yeah, I think Amy's just got 2 or 3 more slides.
So those were our 2021 budget reductions. We had the departments went through and cut $1.8 million. And a lot of that 1.8 was a carry forward from 2020 cuts that they had done when we had to reduce our budget for 2020. And they just said, okay, we're going to cut that same amount again in 2021. And then we cut 1.1. We had the hiring freeze for 3.5 million. And then the mayor's amendment right before we approved the final budget of 2.9 million. So some of those things, like I'm saying, potential uses maybe based on our previous budget cuts, depending on the guidance that we get from the federal government, are some of these things that we had taken out of the budget, like overtime reductions. Overtime reductions for our departments right now is incredibly difficult because we have a hiring freeze, less employees, and then we will cut their overtime as well. We took the 2 transfers to the drainage fund and affordable housing. We didn't do those transfers in 2021. Those are other things. And again, we need to get good detailed guidance from the federal government, but these are just some of the items. There was that 10% discretionary operating cuts that we did, which has been also very difficult for our departments as well. So those are just some examples. There's a lot of equipment and things like that for the fire department and some for the police department that we could add back. So that's more, those things that we cut would be more what I think that they would be looking for us to utilize those funds for. And then we also have continuing expenses for COVID-19 as well, including our vaccination costs for the satellite areas or buildings that we have, facilities, that we have with MUSC. We're using our Arthur Christopher Gym, Gilliard and things like that. And we have some expenses related to that we could also, that we didn't budget for, that we could also utilize those funds for as well. So that's great news, but we just need some further guidance. We're scheduling a meeting for the ad hoc budget committee in April. Hopefully we'll have some good information from the federal government by then. And then maybe we can come back with some recommendations to council by May. So that's kind of the plan for right now.
Thank you, Amy. Anybody else have questions or comments? Councilmember Waring, then Griffin.
Just one question. The language is so explicit for state and territories. You all just think they made a mistake by being vague on municipalities? What's the legal thinking on that? Now that they're so explicit on states not being able to utilize the dollars that way. I don't think it was an accident they left out municipalities. I think it was on purpose. So where is the thinking on our behalf that they must have meant to include cities along with states?
Yeah, and that's the debate that's been going on because it's not specifically listed in a restriction with respect to the metropolitan cities, but it's not expressly exempted either. So there's this gray area. And I think that the concern is that we want to be cautious because, again, as the mayor said, if we go ahead and use the money for a not allowable expense, then it's got to be paid back. So I think it's a statutory construction issue, which either the Treasury Department or the courts will straighten out, hopefully very soon.
Councilman Waring, to comment on your question, my fear is that this effort by the attorneys general to get it clarified may result in the Treasury Department applying that prohibition to everyone.
Well, it's just that cities had so much difficulty through this and additional expenses. I actually think cities, it may work the other way. Cities get granted the right to more flexibility to use it. Yeah. But anyway, we'll see.
Right. Councilmember Griffin.
Yes, sir. You know, I just felt like we owed it to our constituents to reiterate to them that if it's allowable, that our council still has that thought process that we want to reimburse our citizens or balance the budget without even raising taxes due to the fact that the millage increase wouldn't be due until the end of August or September. That my heart was in a good place on this. I was not trying to put the cart before the horse. I just wanted our constituents to know that we still have the commitment, if allowable, that we're still going to make sure that we remedy that situation. And that's all I was trying to do.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I agree with that. As I said in the opening, that's my commitment as well. But I just want to be careful that we don't put ourselves in a situation we regret. And I want to make sure that we're fully informed, you know, as best we can before making those kind of decisions. Councilmember Shade. Oh, Mitchell, I haven't heard from yet. Councilmember Mitchell.
Yes, I agree with that. And even with Councilman Griffin, I understand fully what he's saying. And I agree with that too. But all I'm saying is let's make sure that the money is allowable. Make sure it's allowable when we use it. We don't have money to pay back, because I know I don't have any, but you know, just to make sure of that. But I agree 100% with you, because I voted also that if we receive this money, we'll give it back to the taxpayer to reduce the taxes back. But I don't want to see the taxes go up, because I don't want mine to go up either. But let's make sure that this money is allowable first. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, sir. Councilmember Shade and Appel.
Yes, sir. So, Mr. Dina and Ms. Wharton, would you mind emailing to me the PowerPoint presentation that you just put up for us, and the letter that that Attorney General Wilson sent out for that? And Amy, a more specific question. On one of those slides, you showed $1 million, I think, had been deferred for overtime. And I see our two chiefs are on this meeting. Where are we getting, if we know, with our overtime expenditures? Are we starting to hit the ceiling with that on our expenditures? Because that would normally come from both the fire department and police department, for sort of our greatest expense on overtime from those two departments.
Well, I would say we're concerned about it, Councilmember. I don't believe we've hit the ceiling yet, as you say, and I think the timing of this will be such that we can restore that before it would, quote, hit the ceiling, as you infer.
Okay, I was a little concerned about whether or not we're getting closer to some issues along those lines. So
I think
we've been working with all the departments and have come up with some creative solutions, but especially with police and fire, you just never know. You know, just you can talk to Chief Reynolds about it. I mean, they keep having certain events and things like that, and there's really nothing that they can do. But everybody's trying to manage it as well as they can. It's just incredibly more difficult for police and fire to do that, but they're doing the best they can.
Yeah, I know they are. I know that they're doing the best they can.
Councilmember Appel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Councilman Waring, if you can believe this, when there's a dispute over statutory interpretation, there are rules in Latin, rules of construction that would allow lawyers to argue. Just try to believe this. Opposite sides of the same argument, they could be looking at the same thing. So there's a statutory rule of construction that can say it's allowed, and there's one that can say it's not. So I think that's what's in the process of being worked out. But my comment is that it occurs to me that if you've been out downtown over the weekends and even most nights over the last several months, there's a lot of people eating out at restaurants. There's a lot of people staying at hotels. Maybe our A-tax revenue and our H-tax revenue may be looking a little bit better than probably we feared last year. So I think that as we continue this discussion, as we continue to get more clarity on the legal use of these federal funds, maybe there's some, green shoots elsewhere in our financial picture that can allow us to get to the end result that everybody on this Zoom call agrees on. Nobody wanted to raise taxes on anybody. We all share that goal, Councilman Griffin, of course, and to the extent there's anybody out in the public that's worried about the $2 million increase, we are here and going to work as hard as possible to eliminate that. We just got to do it the legal way. I just want to point out that perhaps, the federal stimulus money is not the only show in town. Perhaps there's some other opportunities, maybe some things we could have cut last year that we hadn't looked at. So let's put everything on the table and try to figure out a way we can avoid this tax increase this September. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, we're going to do that. So any other points or discussion? So we're going to follow up. We're going to learn everything we can. We're going to keep you informed, and we're going to come to the ad hoc budget committee at which all council members are welcome to come and participate when we put that notice out, and then we'll bring a full recommendation to Ways and Means and City Council. So, and Councilmember Griffin, thank you again for bringing it up. We needed to have this information and discussion. It's very helpful, I think. Thank you. So next is our council committee reports. First is Committee on Community Development. Councilmember Mitchell.
Yes, I'm gonna try to make this very quick. Okay, we had a special community development meeting. What was on Thursday, March 11th, 4:30 at 4:30, and under public participation, we had Mr. Bradford and Megan to give us a little update on the low line, and we moved on down to new businesses under number 1 that was approved by the committee. That was a community development block grant, home funds, and the Hopper funds. And then number 2 was only for information, talking about the equity in the low line. Then number 3 and 4 was consider a resolution certifying the property at 221 St. Philip and 223 St. Philip Street as abandoned building. So all those was approved by the committee. And I'd like a motion on those, and I'll go back to what I have next.
Second.
Any discussion on any of those items? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Okay, and then we go on. We had a discussion about the James Lewis complex, and under the James Lewis complex, they are getting ready to thinking about doing an incubator there. And I'm gonna ask Ms. Jordan, our MBE manager, to come forward and explain to us. And we also voted for that resolution with the MBE on that, also with the James Lewis complex doing an incubator for people to learn businesses and go out and be able to open their own businesses and things like that. So Ms. Jordan is on the line.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Councilmember Mitchell. Here in the city of Charleston, we have lost a number of African-American businesses over the past several years. And when we looked at where we can possibly create an incubator, the developer over at the James Lewis's building had about 7,600 square feet on the first floor. When we had entered into discussion about being intentional and creating a business incubator to provide retail space, office space, common space. We were also looking at a restaurant, but we're finding that we may not be able to do that. And then also a data center there, not only for startup business, but to help existing businesses scale their business on the peninsula. The developer offered us with a letter of intent that they will lease us that 7,600 square feet for $1 a year to run concurrent to the lease of 99 years. We're in the process of continuing that conversation of creating this incubator space there at the James Lewis's building. Again, it would be intentional and reaching out to African-American businesses, women-owned businesses, as well as other minority-owned businesses to bring those businesses back to Peninsula, but more importantly, help them to recover from the pandemic. And so we feel like this is a great opportunity that we can take advantage, particularly with the developer offering us that space currently in a dark shell. We'll continue to have a conversation about that 7,600 square feet. And I'll take any questions and bring you back further information as well.
And I would just like to add that definition of dark shell means basically unimproved. So even though we get the space for $1 a year, we would have to pay for all the upfit or the improvements to the space, including even the basics of putting the walls and the lights and all like that in. We'll get the space basically for free, but we'll have to pay for the upfit.
So, okay, Mr. Mayor, the Community Development Committee, I think we voted for the resolution to go forward with that. And so I'm asking the council to go and even to amend that to approve that also, if I can get a motion with that.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or discussion on that? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth, for Ms. Jordan for that, because we need to give her a hand and Ms. Johnson a hand. They work together hand in hand on that. They're working with the development. And that's something good that it's not going to cost us that bunch of money, but it'll be there for 100 years also with the complex.
That's right. It'll be terrific. Was that the end of your report?
That's the end of my report. I'm done. Oh, right. And the last one there is the old business. We didn't take that up because that'll be coming before council.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next up is our Committee on Public Works. Councilmember Waring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. After that wonderful presentation by Mr. Fountain earlier, our Stormwater Committee didn't meet. All items, as you see on your agenda, was voted on unanimously, and I so move.
Any discussion on any of those items? And you're also including the ordinance,
yes,
the non-standard services, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Would you permit me to recognize a couple of people who were on the call who participated in that?
Of course.
So
sure.
I believe that Troy Miller is on the line. Troy served as chairman, and I believe Susan Pearlstein might be with us as well, who helped generate this whole notion of taking this action. And Troy and Susan, let me just say, I've already thanked you publicly twice, but you weren't there, so I'll just have to tell you later. But big thanks go out to two of you. Troy and Susan, do y'all want to make brief remarks? Troy?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think this is a good step forward for what we're trying to do and trying to make better aesthetics and continue to provide the service that we have to with the utilities. I hope this is going to give you as council members a great opportunity to look in your own districts and find these smaller projects that we can tackle quicker and be able to actually accomplish some of this as opposed to it kind of getting clogged up in the system. So I hope this ordinance kind of greases the wheels a little bit and allows you a little more freedom to get things moving. And I think each of you, if you look in your districts, will find these small projects. I know Councilmember Rappel, we've talked about Maybank Highway. I spoke to some of your residents today, Councilmember Seekings, about Broad Street and some of the ongoing things there. And certainly in other districts, I'm sure you guys can all point to spots that could use this. And so I hope you will use it well, and we'll certainly continue to bring options and ideas to you on how to do that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Susan?
Again, Mayor, thank you very much for agreeing to form this task force. It is very nice to be part of a task force that we actually started and completed a project that worked out so well. And I really thank the city staff that worked with me, Troy, and all the city council members that helped make this possible. I agree with Troy. It's time for us to do smaller, less cumbersome projects. And I think once we get a few things in the ground, Charlestonians will recognize what we did here and will appreciate it. So thank you all.
Great. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for recognizing those. I didn't know they were online. So thank you for that recognition of them. Two great public servants. I remember Susan going all the way back to Gimme Shelter, the first bus shelters around. She was the first person that came up with that program. So thank you so much, Susan. Obviously, Troy with the Municipal Golf Club. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't realize they were.
Absolutely.
That's the extent of my report.
Great. We'll vote on the issue in just a minute. I see Councilmember Griffin and Appel to be recognized.
Yes, sir. I just want to make sure everybody on council sees that we took up the small project allocation, that $1 million that is in the budget every year. We were dealing with a little overage. We were looking at like 1.4. Matt rolled up his sleeves and found a way to keep every single one of those projects on the list for this year by doing some design work in 21 and then some the next phase of those projects in 22. So kudos to Matt and his department, and all of our constituents are going to see really the projects that mean the most to them, the ones that really hit close to home. And I know we're all looking forward to that. So just want to make sure everybody got a chance to see that, all the members of the council that aren't on the committee.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Appel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and special shout out to two District 11 All-Stars, Susan Pearlstein and Troy Miller, who played an instrumental role in this process. You know, Susan with South Windermere, and then Troy with, of course, Riverland Terrace. And just so everybody's clear about what we're talking about here, I mean, you can get bogged down a little bit with non-standard service. What does that mean? This is to prevent the hacking of our trees in our neighborhoods and in our corridors. We had a conversation at Public Works yesterday about the job Dominion did outside of Charlestown Landing. You know, we all know what we're talking about here. This is, you know, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand if you put the power lines underground, you can allow the trees to grow and flourish. So that's what this is all about. And we've got an agreement in place with Dominion. We've had a very difficult process over the years, over the many decades. This set of reforms, these improvements that we're putting into place are going to allow more projects to get into the ground all over the city. And it's really exciting to think about. And hopefully we can get this to build some momentum and drive some additional resources to this important work. And, you know, tip of the hat to Chip McQueenie. This is an extremely complicated ordinance. He had to deal with us on all these council committee meetings, saying, well, take this out, now put it back in, now turn it around 360. So this would not have been possible without him, and just a really great team effort all the way around. And of course, Councilwoman Del Chapo making sure the Anson Borough folks are taken care of. And of course, we'll make sure some of those projects get greenlit as soon as we get this finalized. So thank you all.
Unless we forget Tracy McKee and the prioritization matrix to help prioritize the projects in the city.
Sorry about that, Tracy. Of course.
Of course. So any further questions? So we'll approve really all the items from Committee on Public Works, including small project allocations list and this ordinance on non-standard service. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you so much. Next, our Committee on Ways and Means.
For approval.
Second.
For approval.
Motion to approve in a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Next, our bills up for second reading.
Move for approval 1 through 6.
We got items 1 through 6
Second.
up for second reading. And any discussion, questions on any of those 1 through 6 items? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Now for third reading.
So move.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. We have no bills up for first reading. We have executive session for some legal advice regarding the Charleston School of Law transaction. I'm recusing myself from that matter, as y'all know. So I'm going to, if y'all go into executive session, unless there's any other business to come before council tonight, I'm going to beg your forbearance and ask that Mayor Pro Tem Jackson adjourn the meeting after y'all come out of executive session. Is that okay? Is there any other business other than the executive session to come before us tonight?
None.
All right. So can I entertain a motion for y'all to go in?
Move.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I'm